Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Committee of Council. We'll start here today with approval of agenda. I know I have some additions and deletions. I'll go first. The addition that I have, and it's before you, is 11.1, Government Relations Matter. So we'll add that in at 11.1. And then let's go to the list. Councillor Miles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to add under 8.3.1 a report from Peel Regional Police in regards to the City of Brampton out-of-policy remuneration investigation.
And that's 8.3.1. Another business, okay? Is that it? Councillor Sprovier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to add the issue of the conservation area along Heart Lake Road, north of Saddlewood. I drive that area and I see still some fatalities on the road of animals. We had dealt with it in the past, but whatever staff have done has not really solved the problem.
I think there's more. I've been talking to staff. Councillor Willens and I have talked to staff about that, and we've because that part of it is in our area. So we've been dealing with staff on what we can do next. The tunnels have been done, and do you still want to add it, or you want to chat after?
We can chat. It's okay because I've had people actually
100% for sure. Yep.
Concerned. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. That's fine.
Mayor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could put something on the announcement with regards to the emergency exercise that staff did yesterday. I understand there's a slide deck. I didn't see it, but I understand there's one available.
Item 4.1, emergency exercise.
Thank you, Chair.
Yep. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to add a closed session item, 13.1. It's the proposition or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board.
That's been reviewed by the solicitor, okay? And is that it?
That's it, sir.
Okay. Councillor Bowman, you move approval of agenda as amended. All in favor? That carries. Any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, consent agenda. Councillor Bowman. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you again, through you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to pull item 6.2.1 for some discussion, and as well as 8.2.1 and 8.2.3, which are both budget items.
621 is budget, 823 is budget. 621 you have questions on, or is that budget as well?
No, it's questions.
Questions,
yeah.
Okay. So 621 is pulled, 8.2.1 is pulled, and 8.2.3 is pulled. And Councillor Moore? Okay. All in favor of the consent agenda? Moved by Councillor Miles, all in favor? That carries. Our next is announcements, item 4.1, emergency exercise. Do you want to start us off, Madam Mayor, or we have? Okay.
So yesterday I had the pleasure of participating in a exercise Tempest put together by our staff, initiated by our staff, and normally Lan Norman is leading the charge, but chaos was created by Catherine this time. And I just wanted to say how professional the event was. It was put on by a lot of our staff, and I would say, I think it was 8 agencies were part of the exercise, multiple city departments, about 100 volunteers, some who succumbed to their injuries that day, and it spanned 3 different sites in the city. So it was a really good exercise. Luckily, the weather cooperated, and I just want to say how professional it was, and I think our staff were excited by the event. There was a drone taking pictures. I think there'll be a great debrief afterwards, and you know, unfortunately, it's not a matter of if something's going to happen. something will in the future, and we want to be as well prepared as possible. We want to make sure that we work well with all of our partners. So this is yay, we did a great job. I'm pretty sure there'll be a more fulsome report in the future, but it happened yesterday, and I would say a good half of the day was a lot of our professional staff, our firefighters, our paramedics, our police were there working hard to make sure that any gaps in communications, any procedures that may have changed in the last year were looked at. And I just want to say to Alain and Catherine and all of the staff, thank you very much. You did a great job, and I think she's going to have some follow-up comments.
Sure. I mean, it is not without, sorry.
Thanks. Thank you.
Not without contribution from, I think, close to 30, if not more, agencies, city departments, and everything like that, that we can pull this off. So I think we hit roughly around 300 participants across 4 different sites, because Brampton Civic Hospital was also participating. But we did have the opportunity, Alain did, to jump on breakfast television early yesterday morning before the exercise started. So Marianne has that video keyed up, and I think it would be a good introduction. And then, of course, we'll follow up with more photos and more videos and a report to council with a proper presentation once we finished our full series of exercises sometime in late October or early November. So.
All right, thank you very much, Carrie. Oh, we need to go live to Brampton right now. I'm not sure what we're going to see, but I'm told it's devastating. Let's take a look. What has happened here? What has happened here? Something horrible has happened. Okay, not to worry. Yes. Not to worry. Let's put people's fears to rest right now. This was supposed to happen. It's a mock disaster, and so the folks out in Brampton conducting a major disaster simulation today. And here is Alain Norman, manager of the City of Brampton's Emergency Management Office. Alain, what's the scenario behind you?
Well, the scenario is a tornado, which is very much a high risk in this area. We've had tornadoes in the past. We've had Vaughan in 2010. We've had a few up further north. So it's a very real possibility. So we're preparing for it. So we're doing a major exercise, a full-scale exercise. We'll have all the responders here, the fire trucks, the police cars, paramedics, and lots of other agencies. A lot of collaboration between all of these people. We've got over 200 staff that are involved, and we've got over 100 volunteers that are going to play. We're going to do makeup. They're going to have the blood and guts kind of situation, so that it looks as real as possible.
All right, so you're doing this for a couple of reasons right now. You want to get the word out just so people don't get too excited about this. Where are you right now?
Well, this is at the Power Center on Kennedy Road in Brampton. And of course, everything here is staged, so there's nothing real here. But we are practicing. We are making sure that all of our communications are done properly, that all of the different units work together. We certainly want to do this practice. We want to make sure that we have everything ironed out before an actual event happens. We don't want to leave anything to chance, so that's the idea. The safety of our citizen is paramount, and that's what we're working on today.
Now, the other reason you're talking to us this morning is, and this is a message not just confined for Brampton, you want people to be prepared for emergencies.
Oh, absolutely, and we've seen what's happening around the world right now. You were just talking about the hurricanes and all, but there's things that happen everywhere. We're not immune from that, so we want people to be ready. We want people to prepare. So the cities, and Brampton is not the only ones, but the cities are doing their part to make sure that we have everything ready to go in case of a situation like that. But we want the citizens to be ready as well. We want people to prepare on their own. The reality is that with all the people that we have in our cities, we definitely can't get to everybody all at once when something happens. So people may be on their own for a little while. We want them to make sure that they have at home at least a kit with the essential things that they'll be able to survive, really. That's the idea.
Thank you very much, Alain. Good luck today.
Thank you very much.
Alain O'Malley talking to us from Brampton. If you want to know what you should have to be prepared for any disaster, go to getprepared.gc.ca. Getprepared.gc.ca. Some very important information on that site. Here's Mel.
Excellent.
When I created New Kenora
The next video.
Very good. I believe Councillor Bowman and I are in the next.
Correct, yes.
That's going to be fun. You should die. Thank you very much. Thanks, Madam Mayor, for adding that and participating as well. Our next delegation are into delegations. Item 5.1, delegation from Laura Zilny, Chief Executive Officer, Hope 24/7, Success Helping Trauma Victims and the Peel Community. Welcome.
Thank you very much for welcoming me today. I try to get to council at least once a year just to share the successes and the new exciting things that the agency is working on moving forward. And last fiscal year was no different for us, and we've entered this fiscal year, which is also, we have some exciting changes on the hopper. So as you may be aware, we're a trauma center. We work with all persons 12 years of age and older. We do specialize in sexual and relationship violence, but what a lot of people aren't aware of is that we are located in Brampton at Bavard and here, Ontario, but we're also one of the leading trauma agencies in the country, as was ranked by Accreditation Canada. We just completed our major Cumentum survey and had some really great results from that. So not only do you have a leading provider in this community, we work with all residents in Peel. We average about 5,000 individuals coming into our organization. It's all evidence-based, and what's really exciting is that we've also partnered with the region, and we now have a sexuality clinic located on site, and we're working to become a fixed harm reduction site as well, and that should be coming probably, I would guesstimate, in the next 4 to 8 weeks. That should be in place. Something else that others don't know necessarily about us is that we've partnered with a really innovative social enterprise, and so the average wait for psychiatric services across Peel can be 6, 10, 12 months, and because of this partnership and because we have all professional staff, we are able to have individuals see psychiatrists within a 2-week window when they're rostered with us. So we're really trying to break down barriers to access for people and ensure they have the best possible care. And on our staff, we have occupational therapists, psychotherapists, social workers, and the like. So it really is a holistic care model. We kind of have 2 business lines. One is the clinical services. So this is the psychotherapy that's delivered to individuals, families, groups. We also do crisis interventions in other organizations. So if there's a workplace incident, somebody loses their life or a limb, we go in and provide that crisis service for organizations across Peel as well. So these are just things that we want to flag for you. We do some training across trauma and mental health issues because we're really a targeted agency. Trauma is very broad. We have about 70 to 90% of people will experience multiple lifetime traumas, so this is a common thing that happens, and we're here to help those individuals get through it without any adverse events. And so we've partnered with the hospital complexes as well. And so another thing that people often don't know about Hope 24/7 is that we have individuals discharged from the hospital into our care. Because we have regulated staff and because we have access to a psychiatrist, it really makes a big difference. We also have prevention services, so we're in schools on a weekly basis, working with really hard to serve kids that have a lot of barriers against them. So CAS may be involved, they're from low income homes, perhaps English is not a first language. All of these things kind of culminate into some challenges for them. And so we go in there to build resiliency and help them succeed. But we also have 2 new programs that we've launched this year that I'd like to share with you very briefly. And both of these programs are designed to address significant gaps in the system. One is the Enhanced Wellness Program, so individuals who have significant traumas such as homeless youth or individuals at risk of homelessness, sex workers, we go and work with them on site at different organizations to provide safety work, get them stabilized and help them navigate the system. And we also have a program that brings the individuals in-house, and we help to build social support networks for them, because without social supports, that's where we see the cycle in and out of the hospital systems and the criminal justice systems, etc. So we've had really good success rates that I think really speak for themselves, and this is a testament as to why we're ranked in the top 5% nationally for community-based health agencies. But some of the challenges remain. So Peel, as you are acutely aware, is underfunded across the board, and our agency is no different. We receive only 3% of what the average agency who's funded by the Attorney General receives. And this is still something that we're dealing with. Wait times is another thing that we're dealing with. It's substantially cheaper to provide full intensive treatment at our agency than just to walk in the door one time to the emergency room, yet we're seeing individuals constantly enter the emergency room. So these are two things that we're continuing to deal with. But other than that, I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about the agency and just flag for you our successes. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. We do. Councillor Miles.
Thank you very much. The region of Peel, first off, thank you for the great work you do, and thank you for being there for the residents in our community who are experiencing trauma. It's really important that we do have the kind of supportive services that you offer. The region of Peel has been dealing with the whole issue of fair share for Peel for many, many years. At our last council meeting, we had been planning a forum in November to address the whole issue of fair share for Peel. But while they were preparing for this, they found that they really didn't have accurate numbers in regards to the many different agencies that they work in conjunction with. So I just wanted to ask that you be in touch with the region of Peel. I think probably the clerk would be the most appropriate place to discuss how you're not receiving your fair share, because they are going to be looking at trying to bring together a lot of information about what's really happening on the ground within the region. So thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I will be in touch.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thanks again.
Thanks. Councillor Miles, you move a motion to receive the delegation?
I will.
All in favor? That carries. I'll move the chair over to Councillor Bowman for the next two delegations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Delegation 5.2, we have a delegation today for Mr. Jason Field, President and CEO of Life Sciences Ontario. He's here to speak to the staff report regarding the City of Brampton sponsorship of Life Sciences Ontario, LSO. So we will bring forward presentation and report 7.1.1 and 7.2.1 at this time as well, so we can have a discussion at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, council members, mayor. We are very pleased to present this opportunity of a platinum sponsorship of $15,000 with Life Sciences Ontario. And certainly our report indicates we are already working with Life Sciences Ontario. We have had a very successful mission to Bio 2017, as you recall. We're already working with several leads with Jason and his colleagues in supporting investment attraction, in marketing, in connecting and networking with various stakeholders that life science represents. So I'll turn it over to Jason. He's going to speak to the organization and the benefit that we have as a city in working with this life sciences organization across Ontario. And not sure, do we have slides for? Thank you.
Okay.
While Martin's doing that, I'll kick things off. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present this morning. I'll tell you a little bit about Life Science Ontario and I think the opportunity that is in front of Brampton right now for developing regional life sciences sector, and how we can help and work together and partner in order to achieve success. So our organization is an industry association. We're a not-for-profit, fully member-funded So we don't receive any provincial funding on an ongoing basis, although we work very closely with the provincial government as well as regional governments that are interested in building up the life sciences ecosystem here in Ontario. We've been around since 1989 as an organization. We started out as a grassroots association called the Toronto Biotech Initiative, and we quickly realized that the biotech industry was much broader than Toronto, and so they cleverly changed the name to the Biotech Initiative to keep the TBI acronym. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, we changed the name to Life Sciences Ontario to really capture the fact that we're a provincial organization. We cover the entire mandate and scope of life sciences. In terms of the opportunity, I want to just touch briefly on this because I believe life sciences industry is not just Brampton's largest opportunity, economic opportunity. It's Canada's largest economic opportunity. So if you look south of the border at the U.S. and you look at the two largest U.S. biotechs listed on the NASDAQ exchange, their combined market cap is greater than the entire oil and gas sector in Canada, nationally. Two biotechs. We have the science in spades. Our academic institutes are second to none, but we continue to give away our intellectual property at a very early stage instead of creating ecosystems for it to flourish and to reap the economic benefits. And so I believe that there's an opportunity to change this, but it has to start at the local level, the regional levels, and a commitment to building up this industry. It does require long-term vision, and I've had extensive conversations with Mayor Jeffrey about this, and I know that she's committed to seeing this sector grow here in Brampton. In terms of our organization, I said we're an industry association, but we're a little different than most industry associations in that we don't just represent companies. We represent the entire ecosystem. So we represent municipal governments, we represent individuals, students, we represent academic institutes, we represent accelerators. Anyone that's interested in building up this ecosystem, they all have to work together. And I think, again, this is an area that I see Brampton doing wonderful things, bringing in the university at Ryerson, investing in the hospital infrastructure. These are building blocks that are going to create the strong foundation for a strong life sciences ecosystem here in the city. We are a provincial association, but our reach goes far beyond the province. We have partnerships across Canada. We're part of what's called the National Biotech Accord. So other provincial associations we work hand in hand with. We work together on advocacy issues at a national level. We share information, and so we have that connectivity. And in addition to that, we work with other associations across the globe, again, to make connectivity and encourage economic development and trade across these regions. So what do we do as an organization? So we are an advocate for the industry, but we're not, we approach it because we're a broad-based organization. We don't get into things like specific procurement around, let's say, a specific drug, for example. We're really advocating to provincial government, federal governments, regional governments to make the kind of investments needed to develop the life sciences sector here in Ontario, here in Brampton, and see success and the economic benefits and the social benefits that it will produce. So we spend a lot of time talking to decision makers. We spend a lot of time putting together thought leadership pieces, and we spend a lot of time connecting companies to what they need in order to succeed. So that's what we do as an organization. Now I know I'm going to hand it back to Martin. I hope that gives you a sense of the life sciences organization. I've been working very closely with Martin and the team here in Brampton to try to raise the profile as Brampton. I think what is happening here is really special. I see the commitment from the municipality. I see the investments being made. We need to get the word out about this. We need to generate excitement. Your biggest challenge right now is awareness, education, promotion, and marketing. And that's where I think that we can really help you. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand it back to Martin.
Thanks, Jason. So just to continue the conversation, the benefits to the city, as Jason mentioned, is that we need to continue to raise awareness at various events. And as Council has already supported, Bio 2018 in June of next year will be one of our key projects that we work with Jason and his team on. There's also opportunities to work on new leads. So Jason and his team brought us a large pharmaceutical company last week or so to talk about an innovation hub, very significant. Jason has just made me aware of a British Columbia biotech company. So these are all opportunities for us to connect and continue to build the case for investing here in the city. The outcomes, again, really connecting to the 400 professionals in the organization, having access on December 1st into the LSO's policy, input to the province and to the federal government, continue to access the asset map and the reports that the organization prepares, and again, joint promotional and leadership around the Bio 2018 event next year in Boston. I'm just going to summarize very quickly some of our activities. Since I have the floor for a few minutes to talk about health and life sciences, this is my passion and my work, continue to generate jobs and investment in this sector. We've met with Merck, as I mentioned, on September 11th. Today is actually the beginning of Global Biotech Week, so there's several opportunities to network with LSO and with partners in the sector. We have a seminar coming up on this Saturday at 2 o'clock in partnership with our colleagues at the Indian Academy. I'll just hand out the brochure here. Thanks. We have 120 people attending at the conservatory to hear about very interesting subjects around health and life sciences. For example, artificial intelligence in healthcare, drones in healthcare. So you are all very welcome to attend this opportunity to learn. Royal Bank of Canada in Brampton, we're participating in a networking session, education session on October the 12th. This is one of our key mandates in the Health Partnerships Game Changer opportunity is to attract doctors and medical professionals to the city. So that event on October the 12th is focused on how do you start, run, and grow your medical practice in Brampton. As I say, we're doing that in partnership with RBC, the City of Brampton, and the Atlas Healthcare Group. Participating in various conferences to certainly educate myself, but also to promote Brampton Health Achieve Conference in November in Toronto, one of the biggest health conferences in the province, the policy conference on December the 1st, and then continuing to work with LSO and others on bio. Sorry this slide didn't show up. Just to remind everybody, we do have a cluster of companies already in existence here in the city of Brampton in terms of people and companies and leadership already in the health and life sciences field. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present, and look forward to any questions and, of course, your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Oh, it's okay. Thank you very much. We do have a question. Councillor Miles.
Actually, comments. I just wanted to say, Jason, you're absolutely right. We are special here in the city of Brampton, and I want you to know that this partnership that we are forging is going to be beneficial to both sides, to both parties, because we are, in the city of Brampton, headed in the right direction. I'm happy to move the recommendation in the report, Mr. Chairman, but there is a number 4 that I'd like to add to this, and that is that we refer this item to budget. And this I'm going to direct through to the city manager. In the last little while, we have been supporting a number of partnerships. Number 1 with the RIC Centre, the second with Metro Global. I think that's the right name. Toronto Global. And now it looks like this is going to be an ongoing partnership with Life Sciences Ontario. So what I would ask is that this become a part of our budget on an annual basis, so that if we are allocating funds for these organizations, that they actually are reflected in the budget and be part of the process rather than happening midstream all the time. So if the recommendation is an ongoing partnership, which I think it is, then I think I want to move this today. I support it, but I would like to see it as part of our budget process, and included in that would be the other two organizations, Toronto Robo and the RIC Center, and how you or where you put that, whether it be part of a granting program, whether it be a part of something else, we would leave that for staff to determine and come back to us. So, Mr. Clerk, is it appropriate to make that as a number 4?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. So the motion is number 4 essentially would be to refer to the Budget Committee for budget deliberations the following: that opportunities to establish core operating funding as part of the annual operating budget process for life and health science partnerships be considered. So it's just a consideration for the Budget Committee process.
I don't know if it's core operating funding, but it would be an annual partnership. But we can leave that to be. Okay. So that's my motion.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Can I just ask, would this be included in Economic Development's budget, which is presented to Council to pass, or are we talking about creating a separate budget line for these?
The way I see it, it would be in the economic development. We just make it visible that this is an ongoing relationship.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other questions, we have a motion, Councillor Miles, to approve the staff presentations and the recommendations within, as well as the amended number 4. All in favor? That carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Field, and thank you, Martin, for your tremendous work you're doing since you've joined the organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we will move on to item 5.3, which is a delegation from Melanie Campbell, CEO, Startup Peel, regarding the Startup Weekend, and we will bring forward staff presentation 7.1.2 at this time as well. Welcome, Melanie. Daniel, are you assisting on this?
Yeah, I'm going to do the presentation, the staff presentation part of it, and Melanie will talk about some of the benefits of our newly partnership. So, I'm Daniel Bishon from the Brampton Entrepreneur Center, a division of the Economic Development Office, and I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today about this exciting announcement of Startup Weekend. So, you're probably sitting there wondering, what the heck is Startup Weekend? Well, Startup Weekend is a 54-hour event where designers, developers, marketers, and entrepreneurs come together and share ideas, form teams, and launch startups. We're anticipating roughly 50 to 100 participants for the weekend, creating working startups for the event, and are able to collaborate with like-minded individuals outside of their normal networks. Teams experience engaging presentations by industry leaders and will receive feedback by local entrepreneurs. The really neat thing about Startup Weekend this year is we're the only GTA host city for Startup Weekend. So when is Startup Weekend? Startup Weekend is Friday, September 29th to Sunday, October 1st, 2007. On the first day, participants will arrive between 5 to 7 p.m., begin networking, have dinner, because, we have to feed them. After an ice-breaking game, a short introduction by the facilitator, and typically a presentation by a local entrepreneur about pitching best practices in lean startups. Right after that presentation, the audience will have the opportunity to have a pitch fire. A pitch fire is basically the opportunity for individuals that have really great ideas to come up, have 60 seconds to promote their idea. The audience will take all those ideas that's been presented and vote on it. And then those great ideas will be selected and be worked on over the weekend. Teams will be formed organically and consolidate and begin working. On the second day, teams will work all day with the occasional breaks, of course, to eat again, and to and to also listen to a few short talks if they like to in the presentations. Coaches will be circulating the entire event, providing expertise in their fields if those teams would like it. And in Sundays, teams will be working uninterruptedly from the morning to mid-afternoon. They'll wrap up their products and prototypes and present around 3 to 4. They'll wrap up around 3 to 4 to do a tech check and practice the demonstration. At that point, each team will typically have about 5 minutes to present, 2 to 3 minutes of Q&A, and the judges will select the top teams to go to the national awards. So why are we doing this? Economic Development and Brampton Entrepreneur Center are actively building an innovation and collaborative ecosystem in Brampton. In the future, we're going to be increasing networking events such as Brampton Mastermind. We're going to bring back tech talks, have innovative talks. We're going to have more hackathons and more programming across the cities, such as in the libraries and maker spaces. So stay tuned. So who's involved? Techstars, Startup Peel, and Startup Canada, and the City of Brampton for this event. I urge you to be a mentor, judge, or just come on down and see the magic in action on September 29th. Thank you.
So a bit more about the Startup Weekend as Daniel went through the entire process. He had mentioned that this year we are the only GTA selected city. We're actually part of a pilot where it's 8 cities that's chosen across Canada. So our participants will be representing Brampton, the region of Peel, and after the winners chosen from our competition, they will go on to compete nationally. I forgot to mention that Founder Institute is also a very large sponsor of this event this year, and I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with Sunil Sharma, but he will be the main judge for this event. It's an incredible opportunity for Brampton to really get on the map, and by collaborating with the BEC, Brampton Entrepreneurial Center, Denise and Councillor Bowman, thank you so much for inviting me in and really helping to put us on the world stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see somebody reaching for a button. Mayor Jeffrey.
So can you tell me what the event was that Sheridan held? Was that a startup weekend?
Last year?
Yeah, last year.
Yes.
Similar kind of model?
It's similar, yes.
Okay. Only this will be better, right?
This is national. We're getting more exposure, so we really want to engage the community and bring everyone into this. It'll help really put Brampton because on the map. I know I keep saying put Brampton on the map. Everyone knows Brampton exists, but we have an incredible set of minds here, and I really want to showcase that. And this weekend is something that I will be talking about in October on Hill Day, so to Parliament, and really putting it out there that, bring more into Brampton, like we're here, so, yeah.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I love your passion and your enthusiasm, and I did attend last year's event at Sheridan, and I found it exhausting. There were so many good ideas, and unfortunately, I had agreed to be a judge. Really hard to do. Some really cool ideas and things I had never thought about, and we judges had to go away and kind of arm wrestle who was going to win, because they were really interesting ideas. So if you're going to bring more ideas, I urge anybody who's going to be thinking about being a judge, get rested up before you go, because it is really tough work to evaluate some really clever young people's thinking processes. So, and they work as teams, so they're you feel like you've run a marathon when you come back, and you haven't been doing the pitch. You've just been listening to the pitches. So there are some great ideas, and you're right, we have a lot of talent right here close to home, and they just need a place to showcase their talent. So I look forward to hearing what comes out of it, and thank you for your leadership on this profile and on this project, and thank you for helping grow Brampton's profile. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for coming, Melanie. This is going to be fantastic, and I will be joining you as a mentor during Friday and Saturday, so I'm looking forward to that, getting back involved in the business again. So thank you very much, and I encourage anybody who is interested, please talk to Daniel. It's a fabulous weekend, and the mayor is right. We have some very, very, very creative minds here in Brampton, and they're going to be recognized this weekend, so I'm looking forward to it.
And if I can ask, can you guys share it on your social media? Everyone has social media here. Economic Development has put a post out a few times, and we do have it on our Facebook on the Brampton Entrepreneur site, so please share.
And hashtag Daniel?
Hashtag SWPEAL 2017.
SWPEAL 2017. Yeah, if you can email that to us, we'll make sure
to everyone today.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Mayor, would you approve the staff presentation and the recommendations within? All in favor? That passes. Thank you very much. And I will hand the chair back over to Councillor Fleschy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bowman. You pulled item 6.2.1 as the budget amendment. I know you had questions on that as well. I'll put your name on the board. And it's all you.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. I had some questions going through the report, and some of them were answered as I got to the end. Derek, I guess I'm going to be speaking to you. I guess, I don't know. And others weren't. So part of what I wanted to know was on 6.2.1-4, we talk about the stakeholder needs in the community. And I'm just wondering, do we have any type of report showing us where users are coming from? So, for instance, if we've got great programs, a soccer program at the soccer center, do we know whether those people are coming from, Ward 4, Ward 7, Ward 8? Because when I hear stakeholder involvement, I want to make sure that the stakeholders who are using this facility, that it's convenient for them to get to, that it's easy for them to use. And in some situations, maybe there's an area where we've got a recreation center where people are coming from very, very far distances. I just want to make it convenient and easy for the stakeholders, users, to ensure that they are able to participate in the sports that we have here.
Absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair, the soccer center is a unique facility where the majority of, if not all of it, is rental based. So it's rentals through mostly organizations. There's a couple of individuals happening there. So that's, and the primary users are our 3 affiliated youth clubs, the Brams United, Brampton Youth Soccer, Brampton East Soccer. So their clubs utilize that facility. We don't have information on their members in terms of where their members live within Brampton. We know they're Brampton-based membership, but we don't know particular postal codes where their members club. But it is the 3 soccer clubs that you see in the report that primarily use that facility. We also know that we're turning away a lot of non-affiliated clubs that are Brampton-based as well, that have a lot of participants in that in the area. So that, as to your point about location, that's why that's an ideal location. It's basically central Brampton off the 410, off of Sandalwood. It allows access for east and west and central to get to that facility. So you're absolutely right. In preliminary just conversations with the soccer clubs, they feel it's an ideal location in terms of access and for. And then when you get into some of the higher level play, it's also when you're attracting people from outside of the city and sort of the tournaments that they host or the things that they'll use the facility for, it's an ideal location. So we absolutely are thinking about stakeholders, number one, in terms of positioning of where we put that facility.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of putting up I call it fake fields, but fake grass, whatever you want to call it. We're looking more at sports tourism for this, or are we looking for filling the needs that we currently have?
I think it's both. Through you, Mr. Chair, it's both. This need actually helps. It kills 2 birds with 1 stone. It helps alleviate some of the pressure that we're having in terms of indoor gymnasium space. So we have an opportunity, a new opportunity. Council approved some money last year for a better hardwood court surface. So, and we've got the infrastructure in one of our field locations that we do in the summer right now. So we are going to help meet some of that demand. But then, as I just said previously, we are turning away a lot of it's basically the soccer affiliated groups that are utilizing that and then some of our own city programming. But what we're going to be able to do now is expand the use to indoor training for field hockey, for lacrosse, for indoor cricket. You can even do, in some permutations, you can do some training for baseball indoor. We have that as well. So it's not, but then in the summer, when the bubble's down, and if we put in the 2 artificial fields, then we do allow now for some tournament play in conjunction with an adjacency to the facility that we have. So we are broadening our ability for sports tourism, but I wouldn't say that we are doing this specifically for sports tourism. It's an ancillary benefit.
Okay, and I'm glad you mentioned all those other sports because it led right to my next question.
Okay.
Are we sure that putting the bubble up and inviting all these other sports, lacrosse, track and field, floor hockey, whatever it happens to be, basketball, when you put all those together, are we still not going to be in a situation where we don't have enough floor space for all those groups that may want to use that bubble?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a fantastic problem to have, in my opinion, in terms of having that demand. I think it'll be heavily utilized. I think we, even in the report, I've lowballed the projections just to be conservative, but I think it'll be heavily utilized, and I think that we have great staff in terms of our allocation staff that help to try to be fair and equitable amongst the different sports. So we will go from basically 4 indoor soccer fields right now that aren't really configured for soccer because they're in the old arena sort of configurations to 6 fields. So we've increased the capacity, and then I think the onus is on us and my staff and the accountability with me to make sure that we do distribute the allocation amongst the different sports and not just one sport. So I think that's very important. And so we're going to make sure that happens because, as you well know, there's a ton of sports that would love to do year-round training, and I think this allows for that flexibility.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear you say that because that's the answer I was looking for. The allocation is going to be critical.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad you guys are on that. I think probably my second to last question. When we talk about training space for track, we mentioned indoor training for track and field. But are we talking just running, or are we talking high jump? Are we talking long jump, where we have a need for indoor training facilities for those as well? Are we looking at that type of thing as well?
So I would say that in the configuration that we've proposed, you would have the ability to do a couple of those, maybe not long jump in terms of, because we're putting a track at the sort of south end to allow, it's a 60-meter basically track, so you can do some training for your steeple or your sprints piece. I'd have to look at it with my staff to see if we could do some of those other things, but primarily it would be for your sort of sprint and pieces. But having said that, the field use, because now that you're in a bubble, you could do some, I know that some places do allow some other track and field training like shot put and other, if you've got the right equipment. There's an equipment issue that you'd have to deal with the clubs, but I wouldn't preclude anything from being able to happen there, but I would say primarily right now as it's configured, it would be a lot of your sprints and your track-based amenities.
Okay, because I know those are important too. They probably don't take up a lot of room either, like for a high jump pit or something like that. So if you could throw that in. And I think the last question I just had was taking it down and putting it up every year. We've got an average life expectancy of 10 years for a bubble doing it that way?
A little bit, through you, Mr. Chair, a little bit longer, yeah. Probably, you probably could get 12 to 15 with the quality that they're doing right now, but 10 years, 10 to 15, I would put it in that range.
Okay, and it's basically about 65 grand each time we do that?
It's basically around that, sir. I'm just going to confirm the numbers, but around, I believe that is the right number.
Yeah.
Number.
I mean, it just begs the question, 65 grand to take it down and 65 grand to put it up, is it?
So the reason, through you,
should
Mr.
we leave
Chair,
it up? I don't know.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. The reason for that is we find when it comes to summer, most of the sports prefer to play outdoor, right? So a lot of your bricks and mortars, even field houses around the GTA or even in the States where I've traveled, they sit pretty much empty during the summer. So the reason for up and down allows you to maximize the use. In the winter, when it's cold, we can get people indoors and playing. And then because of the field configurations, we're putting in some quality fields, artificial fields, then we can take that bubble off and maximize it during the summer. So it allows for the best programming utilization throughout the whole year. It is, and it's not, I would say maybe 10 to 15 years ago, it was problematic up and down. Now they have companies that do that on year-to-year basis for a number of municipalities. So it's a cost, but I think we will more than recover the cost that's necessary to go up and down.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Councillor Miles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Actually, my comments were in regards to the bubble. Our experience at Ching Park with the bubble wasn't really a positive one, and we did have a death related to that, someone climbing on the bubble, deflating it, and the annual estimated operating cost is $423,000 per annum. So I guess I question the bubble as well. I don't know if there's a different kind of structure that we could be considering, maybe with removable walls or something of that nature, permanent roof, removable walls, so that we don't have to put the bubble up and down when the sports park, the Wildwater Kingdom, when they came to us about their outdoor field that they wanted to put a sports bubble on during the winter months. I did get quite an education about costs and the wear and tear on the bubble, etc. So I would like to ask that you do explore other types of facilities and bring it back to council other than the bubble. So I don't know, I'm sure there are other kinds of structures that we could be using rather than the bubble. And I guess when I'm looking at, even if the cost was a lot more, the amount that it's going to cost us and the time to put it up and down, it could be a mortgage on a loan if we were going to expend more funds on that kind of thing. So I would really like us to look at that and bring it back.
So, Councillor Miles, I think what you're about to hear is probably they've looked at all other alternatives and this is it.
Yeah.
So if I hear a referral, I haven't heard one yet, but that's kind of what I'm thinking you're leaning towards. But I'll throw it back over to Derek to comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's exactly it. We did look at a number of different structures for this facility. This is the most value for money, cost benefit. It allows, as I just previously said, for the flexibility in terms of programming. If you put a bricks and mortar building up, you basically are, or even a partial bricks and mortar building up, you're relegating or your ability to use it in the summer for those two fields, which are primary fields for our programming in that area. So we did look into cost. This was a great collaborative project, not just with my division, with building design and construction, with parks construction. It was a really great team effort, and they came with a number of options. But in terms of, I would strongly recommend this is the best option in terms of value for money, in terms of allowing flexibility of programming, and in terms of just allowing us to position ourselves for some great flexibility and adaptability in the future. I think it doesn't constrain us in terms of, and the bricks and mortar building, to be quite honest, is substantially more when we looked at the numbers. So this is our best recommendation in terms of course, I'll take direction from council on that, but in terms of our recommendation as staff, we've looked at a number of options, and this is the strongest option that we would strongly recommend for this.
So the sports center, people aren't using the fields in the summer, or they are?
In the sports center, what we do is we convert one of the fields to gymnasium space, and so that field becomes a gymnasium space, and they use that heavily during the summer. The rest of the fields during the day are heavily utilized for our camp programming, so we use our camp programming during the day. And in the evenings, we have some usage, but it's not as if you would go into that building from now, September to April. Basically, that's when the heavy utilization is of those fields. We do have rentals and we do drop-in programs. We program it. We're not going to let an asset sit idly by, but the rental demand is not heavy for the sports, especially for soccer, because a lot of people are going into the 11 versus 11 soccer in the summer and playing on the rep teams, and so there's not that demand that is the same that it would be in the winter and the winter months. Yes, the fall winter months.
So the indoor soccer fields are not being well utilized in the summer months?
They're being well utilized in terms of our programming, and from a rental standpoint. So when we looked at the report with the 3 affiliated soccer clubs, a lot of their activity turns to the outdoor use, right? Because the indoor season runs from fall to basically the spring, and then everybody turns to outdoor use. So for soccer, it would be the same thing for cricket. It would be the same thing for lacrosse. Field hockey. All of them turn to their outdoor usage. So what's happening? The trend in sports, really, in terms of utilization, is when you specialize, or if people are really playing at a little bit of a higher level, you do training in the winter, and in the summer you go to the full-fledged sports. So that's the model we're seeing, and that's the model that we can support, and we supplement that with programming, our city-owned programming. We run a lot of programs through the winter and summer months in terms of field usage there. So I wouldn't say they're not utilized. I would just say that from a rental standpoint, from the 3 major clubs, they're not as substantially used.
So with the extreme changes in weather and this past summer being so wet and rainy, have you taken a look at how that has impacted outside sports activities?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we constantly monitor activity. The great thing about, so we're proposing 2 artificial turf fields. The great thing about turf fields is they drain more quickly. You get the turnaround, that you can put heavier utilization on them. So we find that with turf fields, we get a maximum utilization of those fields, and that's what we're proposing there. So the weather elements you usually find a higher level of play on the turf fields, whether it be football, soccer, whatever it may be. So those level of sports, unless there's lightning and thunder, they pretty much play through rain and play through adverse conditions. So we find that we get a good.
I wasn't thinking of that. I was thinking in terms of the other outdoor sports fields around the municipality and the impact that the weather would have had on their schedules, their season. And I guess I'm not convinced that a permanent indoor facility wouldn't be preferable based on weather and whatnot. But that's my opinion, and I think it'd be interesting to take a look at what's happened in the last year with the sports groups and their scheduling. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Derek, for the presentation. This question, have you estimated the possible income of having the bubble being used during the winter time? Have you done an estimation of how much it's going to bring into the city?
Yeah, if you look at appendices number 2B, apologize, through you, Mr. Chair, appendices number B, we have a very, very worst case scenario estimate of about 400, well, basically $500,000, but we think at a conservative, it's almost close to $750,000. Actually, when we programmed that to the hilt, and I actually, working with my staff, have scaled back those numbers just so we're not overselling it, but we actually think we will approach, once we're full running, close to $1 million in revenue. That's the experience of our neighbors to the south. It's our experience to some other locations that we think that the revenue will not be a problem here, because we're already turning people away in terms of rental for the indoor space that we have right now.
So then the 65,000 up and down, it's 130 versus $1 million.
Yeah.
Big profit.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, absolutely. We feel that we can more than cover the up and down costs yearly.
Yeah. And having the actual field houses that was planned in our past, would that be? Are they utilized? I know there's one in Waterloo that I went to see, and a proposal was made. Are they well used in the summertime, or are they those indoor field houses, or are they kind of sit unused, mostly used in the winter?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my experience with most of the ones that I'm familiar with are they sit relatively unused, unless you can do something like we do, where we put in camps and different type of we find a use for it. But in terms of rental, they don't sit in the summertime. They don't really sit.
So then, it actually going with a bubble is actually a very good business sense. Makes good business sense.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we believe so, yes.
Even
absolutely.
if it has to be replaced in 10, 15 years' time.
Yeah.
Because the income level is it builds up, and it's good income for the city.
Yeah, we do, we believe so, yeah.
And do you feel that there's a need for two possible bubbles? Because I know you have two artificial fields, but you only show one bubble.
Yeah.
So do you believe that there could be enough demand that you could have two bubbles on that site?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are going to continue to monitor that, and at the appropriate time, we come back to council. If we have that great problem, that's a great problem to have, the significant demand, we would come there. I wouldn't preclude that as a city reaches a population of 1 million people, and we're a young city, and as sports continue to grow, I wouldn't preclude that as an option. Right now, at this moment, for the immediate future, I would say we would like to do one, see how it goes, and then evaluate that and continue to monitor it.
Mm-hmm. And if the city, through the chair, if there's a need for these bubbles to be used for recreation, or for events, can they be used, or is there too much noise in there with the air being pumped?
Through you, Mr. Chair, one of the things we continue to evaluate is event space. We know that it is a problem. It's a delicate balance when you have premier sports facilities and using them for events of that nature, just because of the usage, food. You get a lot of things that deter the maintenance. What we are trying to do with the actual building, though, is the existing floor that's in there right now is I would say it's an adequate floor, and we would like to move that to facilitate events indoor in one of those field houses in the indoor piece, and so it's not detracting from the significant sports floor that we're installing, but allowing for another piece there. So in the bubble right now, we haven't projected. We think that the utilization will be so substantial by the sports groups that we probably won't have the ability to do events in there. So that's not something on our radar, but we'll continue to, as everything, we continue to monitor and evaluate.
Yeah, because I'm hearing that there's a big demand for event space that we need to also address for in our city too, going forward. So how we do that, that's probably another discussion for another day. So thank you. I like I support your report, and I think it's a very good strategy, and be willing to move the report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, when that time comes, I'll call on you. Yeah. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I do support the report, and I'm really glad that staff is really being proactive in understanding, our city is really evolving, and that we're a growing city, and that this is definitely one of the premier locations in the city, and that we're really starting to diversify the usage of the space. I'm looking here, and I have a lot of experience as well with a lot of residents calling me, a lot of different groups calling me, and I'm sure that other councillors can attest to it as well, whether it's cricket, lacrosse, I'm seeing football here. There's a really a great need, and I'm really glad that, this report is here, and it's identifying and addressing a lot of the issues that we've seen, and that's why I said we're being proactive, our staff is being proactive as well. By allowing this bubble, hopefully if this goes through, we can, not being biased to basketball, but there really is a need, and I think I've always said we're probably one of the best sports cities in producing athletes in all of Canada, and I've heard this from far and wide all over the country, and we only have 2 dedicated gyms, Core Meadows and Cassie Campbell, and we run, the city hosts, I'm sure you're aware of it, like a showcase, a talent showcase every year in the summer at Soccer Center, where we have, I think Wiggins has played there, Andrew Wiggins. We've had all these, former, high school standouts who are currently in the NBA, NCAA scouts come. We have, major Division I basketball coaches come to Soccer Center. And I think if we were able to year-round support a lot of the basketball programs, it'd only be beneficial to the already strong presence we have in basketball, but in other sports as well. And so I'm really excited. I think it'd be a good opportunity, and I think we're really, again, addressing and satisfying a lot of those needs that these sports groups do have. But, I've also had a chance to go to Cassie Campbell on a number of occasions as well, and hopefully down the road we can maybe get a bubble up there as well. I think field hockey is such a growing sport, and I think that'd be pretty good. I think if we also looked, down the road, down up west a little on Sandalwood for Cassie Campbell as well, down the road.
Okay, thank you. We'll take those comments. Thanks. Thank you.
So I'll jump in here and say that I've been talking about a bubble in this city for 4 years, and almost 4 years now. But I've been looking for that Cassie Campbell bubble because we have a dire need for a lot of our field hockey players go to BC, and they could be staying here, and the opportunity to hold national tournaments. We have a lot of players from Europe that come over here in these smaller size tournaments, and they're mainly going to either BC or to Toronto. But there's a big need, especially at Cassie Campbell, and I thank Councillor Dillon for bringing that up. I'm glad to see that we finally have a bubble, because I've been talking about it for a long time. So, Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you for the chair. Thank you for the report. Certainly everything that's been said, it's really, just from a marketing perspective, to have a Brampton Sports Center, I personally really enjoy it. I know I get contacted a lot from the soccer teams who complain that there was no indoor space and they'd have to go to Hershey Center or they couldn't find it. So it really meets the needs and really opens up the opportunity for even other sports to grow and stuff. So, great work, and I just think the impact is going to be excellent in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see in the report that you talked about the areas that you evaluated. What was an FCC evaluated?
Flower City and soccer. We really started the evaluation on some places that had turf fields, because turf fields allowed us to really maximize that utilization over winter and summer. So we started at Sandalwood, Credit View, and we did some other locations. FCC is really, there's a balance in the city that we need to have between grass and turf, and FCC we really protect as one of our premier grass facilities, natural grass facilities, in terms of allowing that type of play. When we looked at sort of the configuration, proximity to residences, there's a bunch of different reasons that we went through where that one wasn't an ideal location for a bubble initially. Or when we evaluated it. FCC is a great location for outdoor sports if you go by there in the evening, kids, and from all levels of play that we have having at FCC. So when we looked at it internally, Councillor, it wasn't really, it didn't gravitate towards the top of the list in terms of a location.
But, okay, you just said you looked at it, but the report says you didn't.
We discussed it internally. We didn't go through. Yeah, we discussed it internally.
We didn't do a full evaluation.
So we, as we said earlier, as a city, if we have that beneficial problem of having too much demand, we will look at additional locations in the future. But it didn't gravitate towards that.
I just want to put a plug in for the west side of the city, because our residents sometimes feel a little neglected, that certain areas are getting all these new facilities. Now, granted, we've done a lot of work on Century Gardens, and we've done a lot of work with Chris Gibson, and we're to update, and some of the family of Bramley facilities have done some work to upgrade those older facilities. But, I go back a few years ago when the tennis club came to us and asked for a dome, because the east side of the city had a dome for tennis, but the west side was a tennis club that were kind of left on their own with a little assistance from the city, but the east side had a city facility for tennis. So I just want to, say we need to start concentrating on all of the city and not just one area. Now, this makes sense. I'm going to support it. It makes sense. In reading over the report, you've done an excellent job of explaining this. We talked a lot about this soccer thing. This is not a soccer center anymore. You're asking to change the name in it. And I guess for that reason, that it's for all the city. But, you know, the residents of Ward 1 and 5, we've heard, Councillor Moore and I have heard over the years, you know, they're tired of traveling a long ways to get to do what they have to do. And here's another example that, you know, if they want to play in the dome, they have to travel to the other side of the city. You need to know what's going to get 2 domes. Now another council member has asked for maybe a possibility of a 3rd one, when one side of the city doesn't have anything. And we're neglecting, I'm not saying we're purposely neglecting, when it's harder to do when you have built-up areas, obviously. But we have a whole area from Chinguacousy Road to Mississauga Road, from Queen Street to Boulevard, that has nothing. Not even a place where those residents can go and meet indoors. Nothing. My estimation, a very, very badly planned area. But you know, we need to, and I didn't represent it. Somebody's gonna say, well, why didn't you do something about it? Well, I didn't represent it. So I've inherited, Councilor Moore and I have inherited an area that, you know, and that's not a knock on the other council members that were doing it, because they were also working on the Casca Campbells for their area and all that other stuff. So I don't want to be negative about this, because I'm going to support this, but I want you to think about that. And FCC, to me, is a perfect example of an area that, in my estimation, is very underutilized right now. And for many reasons, we've held on to it, and we've thrown staff over there and done some stuff. The best utilization of that area right now is the senior center that's in there. But to me, that's about it. You know, we've got a whole area there where we have staff just going into, and where a lot of their equipment is stored in there that really could, in my estimation, it could be stored somewhere else, and we could have more facilities in there. But I'm just throwing that out there to say, I'm going to keep harping for stuff in our areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Sprovier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I sympathize with Councillor Gibson, and I do believe that there has something extraordinary has to also happen on the west side. And actually, just this morning when I met with staff, I suggested there should be an Olympic-sized swimming pool in the new rec center that's coming up on the west side of Brampton. So push for that, and I'll be supporting you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sprovier. Councillor Moore.
Well, thank you, and I'm going to support the recommendations in the report. It makes a good business sense, and I want to thank you for the work that you put into it. But I also want to lend my voice to Councillor Gibson's cry for help, because we've been talking about it now for far too many years, about the area, quite frankly, south of Boulevard, and I'm going to say all the way down to Steeles Avenue. And I'm going to sort of stretch the boundaries a little bit and say west of McLaughlin, other than Flower City campus that's there that serves the whole city, there is no civic infrastructure for the vast number of residents that are there. So I'm personally asking you, Derek, to sit down with myself and Councillor Gibson and the two councillors from south of Queen, if they're interested in joining us. But we can't just talk about it and whine about it anymore. The fact is, we have got a huge number of residents that have zero access to indoor meeting space or amenity space. I know we've got the park planned up at Mississauga on the southeast corner of Mississauga Road and Boulevard. And I guess we'll put in some washrooms or something there. It's not good enough. And we've got a large number of residents in there who use what really is second to none parkland, valley land presence in that part of the world. But that is not keeping our residents healthy and active as it should. And so we've got to do better. So I'm asking you, please sit down with us. We have to have a serious conversation about this. We can look at all of the other facilities and we can come up with 1,000 reasons why we should be putting enhanced facility space or enhanced programming in another location because it's the shortest, most direct route. But when I look at what little available land there is, if there is any, west of Chinguacousy over to Mississauga Road, And don't tell me that, oh, well, we're planning an Olympic-sized pool west again of Mississauga Road over by Hamilton Road. That's still not going to serve those residents between McLaughlin and Mississauga Road. You know, I know we've had a lot of conversation about Councillor Miles and Councillor Fortini's area, and when it was planned, you know, the smaller facilities. You know, it was planned the way we should be planning them today, where everybody can walk to a school and a neighborhood rec center and neighborhood commercial. If you
Councillor,
really and truly want to keep people healthy.
We're here to deal with this, the report
I
in front of us.
understand.
I know, but you're just starting to repeat yourself. We get it. We all
Yeah.
support you.
You're
100%.
sounding an awful lot like a husband, Councillor.
Okay, then I'll just shut up and let you continue.
And I'll shut up now too. Thanks. I think
Thank you,
my
Councillor
point's
Moore.
been made. Thank you.
Councillor Medeiros, on this topic?
Yes.
Just throw your
The
support
right
flag.
way. But certainly, I think the area councillors, Councillor Gibson and Councillor Moore, because certainly Councillor Bowman and myself from day one, that's been our moment. You know, that's something that we've really ranted about. And I remember when we talked about shade shelters and park infrastructure, and you know, we went off. So it's been rant after rant after rant, and I was hoping finally at a budget process. So hopefully there's some momentum here to you know, really start looking at something, a community hub, something of some sort. But I do thank the area councillors, and I look forward to the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Sprovieri that item 6.2.1, the recommendations, therefore, the budget amendment request to begin procurement for proposed construction of artificial turf fields and seasonal dome structure at Dixie Road, Sandalwood Park, Brampton Soccer Centre. All in favor? That carries. Thank you very much. We'll now move to item 6.2.3, report for additional information regarding delegation by owners of 8 Mancroft Crescent in connection with their encroachment. And the report from our real estate coordinator. Are there any questions on this? Do you want to hear Councillor Miles?
I just had one question.
Okay.
From the, have you spoke to the homeowners on Mancroft? And
Through the chair, I have been in discussion with the owners, and they are in the process of completing their application at this point in time. Yes, so we are working with them to hopefully resolve the matter in a timely fashion.
That's great, and I think this was a very good way to resolve this issue, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome, Councillor.
Thank you very much. No more questions. Councillor Miles, you'll move the report with the recommendations. All in favor? That carries. And we'll move to councillor question period. Any councillors have a question related to the community services section? Seeing none. We will break for 10 minutes and then come back 11 o'clock for ACTA. Because I'm asking for a break.
Way to go, Chair.
All right, if we can, do we have quorum? Not yet. John's here. Mayor's here. Yep, we got, oh, okay. No. Absolutely. Welcome back. We got 6? Okay. Thank you very much. We will move on to the Economic Development and Culture section. But before I do that, I just want to welcome the fire department is here, and they have the pink shirts that everybody's been seeing and being spoken about. So they will be in council next week again. I hope everybody has gone online and ordered their pink shirt in support. So he's right there if you want to talk to him. So anytime. Thanks. We will move on. We've already taken care of 7.1.1 and 7.1.2. We now have a presentation from Mr. Bob Sagan, Advisor, Office of the Chief Administrative Officer, and Paul's here, Paul Aldinati, the Expediter, Economic Development and Culture, regarding a university update. So the floor is yours, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Members of Council, we'd like to continue the practice established by our former colleague Michelle McCollum of having regular updates, keep you posted as this is continuing on. As you know, there are key dates coming up, and we don't want to lose the Council's attention on this issue. I'm going to turn over to my colleague Paul Aldinati, who's joined the team, and he'll take you through the first several slides.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. You will recall back on September 6th, Council endorsed in principle. Where's my There we go. Back on September 6th, Council endorsed in principle an investment of up to $150 million towards a university facility and center of education, innovation, and collaboration in downtown Brampton, up to $50 million over 10 years into the post-secondary facility, and up to $100 million into a joint use center for education, innovation, and collaboration in downtown. Of course, all subject to final proposed details, performance measures, and outcomes, and in addition to the proposed provincial funding. Our partners, you all know, Ryerson University, Sheridan College, Province of Ontario. We are working with them to solidify our partnerships as well as with other stakeholders such as the library.
Members of committee, you must be in your seats to be counted for quorum. Thank you.
Sorry, Paul.
It's okay. Sorry. Sure. We're solidifying our partnerships with our stakeholders, with our partners. That include the library, our school boards, the Region Appeal. We're expanding our discussions on the programming and the curriculum that Sheridan College and Ryerson are going to be providing. We're getting into the details of our innovation hub, which can also include the potential for a central area library, entrepreneurship, and a cultural space. As well as part of all that, we need to embark and, well, we've already embarked on it. We're just trying to solidify it and get into more details, a memorandum of understanding with our partners, Sheridan College and Ryerson University, to understand who's responsible for what the obligations are and where we're going with that. From here, I'll pass it over to Bob, who's going to give you a little bit more detail on the Innovation Hub.
Thank you, Paul. Chair, through you and members of the committee. We're going to spend a couple of seconds here on the Innovation Hub. This is an opportunity we see for moving forward faster with both Ryerson and Sheridan. And we've been working with Valerie Fox, who headed up the DMZ when it was started, the co-founder, executive director, to learn about her insights on how that started, what went right, what went wrong, lessons learned, how we could apply it to ourselves. She's also doing work now across communities across Canada to do startup innovation sites. So what has she learned, large centers, small centers, to do this? And you've heard earlier from Daniel Fashun, who works with us on the university team on the Startup Weekend. We have potential here to really build a base, and that's the intent. And through our innovation work plan that we're working with Daniel and ourselves and Brampton Entrepreneur Center, working through Bob Darling's group in Economic Development and Culture to really help form that base. So when we bring the zones here early, they have something to work with fast. They can move faster and start faster than they had when they originated at Ryerson. We're also using the opportunity here to also reach out to other zones, and my colleague Paul has already started that work with the biomedical zone and Peel Memorial to see if we can bring another zone into the city. Again, with the full support of Ryerson and Sheridan. The other item I want is Waterloo Innovation Summit. This is an annual summit at Waterloo. It's an opportunity for Waterloo to showcase its activities. It's also on the Innovation Corridor. They had about 300 people there. My colleague Daniel was attending, as well as Michelle Gadzik from the CEO's office, who's also in the university team. I was able to attend a short time. 300 people, mostly from Ontario, Waterloo, of course, across Canada for some, but also representatives from the United States, Japan, New Zealand, China. They've got that cachet now, and we're looking to how we can work into that. That's why they attended, build, have talks to people, learn, but also start networking about our interest to be a full partner in the Innovation Center. The summit itself was focused on hacking, which, as all of you know, is not a topic of discussion these days, but also two things: how all the new technology, all the speed of technology is interacting with people. How do you make that work better than it has in the past, instead of seeing a lot of transformation where people lose jobs? How do we have that transition so it's far more effective? The other piece was, how do you build cybersecurity into the technology from day one? That has not been done. So initial discussions, as you heard from President Lachimi last 2 weeks ago, about their thoughts about cybersecurity. Sheridan has similar designs as well. How can we marry that up with the Center for Advanced Manufacturing, for example, and start building cybersecurity capacity into the technology that will go into the future machines when machines are talking to machines? So there's enough ways. The other piece, and I said it to Chris, is trying to make sure that we're far more effective as a participant on the Innovation Corridor. People know us, see us. We're talking about the new Center for Innovation and Collaboration, and we're also on top of what's going on in the other communities up and down the corridor. And I mentioned about the integrated game changers. Paul is a good example of how we're trying to work with the health partnerships on our innovation activities. You know, October 2nd is a key date. That is when Ryerson must submit its final template to the province for final review of all the details of the programming, the innovation aspects, the partnerships, the city's role, and the site. And then we anticipate that by early December, the province will be in a position to announce all the details of that. Though we anticipate that any final funding will be another review because of the capital issues involved. And our next steps, continuing to work with our colleagues across the city and other colleagues across the wider city community. Finally, also looking at the steering committee between Ryerson, ourselves, Sheridan, and the province as we come closer to October 2nd, knowing what's going to go into the document Ryerson is submitting, but also kind of understanding what the implications are as we work towards implementation, assuming the province's decision and assuming the council at a future date will review the earlier proposal and formalize it. But how do we make this work faster, work effectively, and lead to the jobs and growth and prosperity we hope for? And we'll be working with a lot of partners. We've started the discussions, but as Paul mentioned, with the library, part of this new Center for Education and Innovation, how to work with the library board, how to work with the school boards. You may think about this. Children entering grade 8 and grade 9 may be among the first students being at the new university. So how to work with the school boards to such that they're helping this. And finally, how we work with our business community so they're ready for the university rather than waiting for several years till the final first graduate comes. So that's our update, Mr. Chair. Any questions?
Seeing no questions, Councillor Sprovieri, will you move the presentation? Thank you very much. All in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much. We've done 7.2.1 when we did 5.2 this morning. No correspondence. Councillor question periods. Any questions? Oh, just under the wire, Councillor Medeiros.
Through the chair, thank you. I guess to Bob Darling and his staff, and I don't need an answer now, but in terms of our laneways, and I'm not sure if that, I know that's a planning economic development, are we looking at developing some form of laneway strategy, incorporating it into, I guess, our planning vision of the downtown? And I don't need an answer now, but it's just something I hope that we're doing an inventory of what we can do with the lanes and so on.
So through the chair, absolutely, and we do have a strategy, and we are this year we've also engaged a lot of opportunity to use the laneways, working closely with our planning group, especially what's happening with the downtown and the Reimagine project. We'll obviously come back with some real exciting projects.
Excellent. Thank you through the chair. It's good to know that we're thinking about it, and it's funny because it perked my interest when we talk about the Laneway, I guess, celebration that's coming up. And I know Toronto's really doing a lot of work, so it's great that we're also keeping an eye on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Medeiros. Seeing no other questions, I will pass the chair over to Councillor Miles.
Okay, I believe I have a live mic. So we're starting off with staff presentations. There are none noted. The police. So are we going to have a presentation on 8.3.1 from Fiona? Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry, committee. Okay, so the first report was pulled out of consent, item 8.2.1 by Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. 8.2.1 talks about the tax adjustments, the cancellations and reductions pursuant to the Municipal Act. I guess I'm speaking to you, Dave. I don't even know how many, 200 here, all under the heading of MPAC valuation error. So this, if I understand this right, this is an MPAC error that artificially inflated or over-evaluated a particular property.
Through the chair, maybe I'll have Yvonne Quetchen, our manager tax and assessment, come down and maybe just speak to a little bit about the
thank you very much.
The actual appendice. Oh, sure.
Through the chair, this is an error that was made by MPAC on condominium plan by Onboverd. And what happened there when they put the assessment on the parking lots, they valued them at full value without looking at the declaration of the condominium. It turns out that the 200 properties that are on this report are actually common element. Therefore, they shouldn't be valued at full value, rather at nominal value.
Okay, so we already sent the tax bill to them, and now we've got to make an adjustment?
That's correct.
So is MPAC reimbursing us for any of our costs involved in redoing 200 tax bills?
I know I had numerous conversations with them on that subject. They are not going to be paying us back for the man hours that we spend on it, but they are aware that errors like that are not acceptable.
Okay, so they owe us?
They owe us.
Yeah,
hopefully
okay.
they return in growth.
Thank you. That's my question that I wondered, whether, we're doing all the work. We've issued the tax bills. We've had to reissue new tax bills in collection on their error. So I just wondered whether there was any reimbursement. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Motion then to move the recommendation, Councillor Bowman? So moved. All in favor? That's carried. Item 8.2 was in consent. Item 8.2.3 was withdrawn from consent, and that was withdrawn by Councillor Bowman.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Through you, Madam Chair, I withdrew 8.2.3.1 because it is a budgetary item, and I think I've made it clear in the past I don't like to see budgetary items just flow through on a consent motion. So I withdrew it, wondering if there was any conversation or questions that other councillors might have had on this. Like I said, it's a budgetary item, so I don't think it should have been in consent.
Okay. I don't see any questions.
Okay,
thank you. Are you moving the report, Councillor Bowman?
Yes, I will.
Okay, the recommendation has been moved by Councillor Bowman. All in favor? That's carried. Item 8.2.4 is the operating budget and reserve report. And I would ask that you move the chair be heard. Thank you. All in favor? That's carried. When I read this report, I wanted to point out to members of council that this is probably the best news report that we have on this agenda, because what it is doing is really pointing out how financially sound this municipality is and how the decisions that we've been making in regards to our finances and our budgeting process are really yielding positive results. So there was just a few things. Brampton has a AAA credit rating, and we are one of 6 Canadian municipalities to have a AAA credit rating. And just to Mr. Sutton, how many years has the City of Brampton had a AAA credit rating?
To the chair, we've had a AAA credit rating since 2006.
Since 2006, so 11 years in a row. That's really good news. In regards to our development charge reserve funds, for many years we were in a deficit position, mainly because of our capital budget process that we were using. We changed that process. And today, in our Development Charge Reserve Fund, we have over $74 million. Really good news. Our Building Rate Stabilization Reserve Fund, again, this one has moved up from $5.4 million to $38 million in our Rate Stabilization Reserve. A lot of this is due to our building permits. However, what this does, it gives us a cushion for those years where we may see a downturn, and that was a big concern in the last term of council about budgeting, by putting in our budget for our building permit funds. Cash in lieu of parkland, again, $93.7 million, which is a significant improvement over past years. Funds that hopefully we will be able to provide more rec facilities and activities for our community. I really liked the General Rate Stabilization Reserve. Council set a policy to have 10% of our budget in a rate stabilization reserve, and that amount is $63 million, and in fact we have $65 million. Again, you never know what's going to happen with the economy. We have ups and we have downs, but what this is doing is really positioning the municipality well for the future. Again, a really good news story. Interest Rate Stabilization Reserve Fund has $11.3 million, but in talking to Mr. Sutton about this report, this particular reserve fund has been able to offset about $9 million a year. So we've taken the interest earnings from our rate stabilization reserve and we've offset the impact to our taxpayers at about 2% per year for the last.
Sorry, just to clarify one thing,
okay.
Madam Chair. The interest is the interest earned on the combined former hydro
yes.
Reserves. So the interest rate stabilization reserve is a reserve there to balance off if we're short on those investment earnings that we've built into the budget.
Okay.
But you can see that we have sufficient capital there to offset any shortfall if we were to have that in the operating budget.
So, but we have been using those funds to offset tax increases.
Correct. So we
right?
have $9 million built into the base budget to offset property taxes effectively from those investment earnings.
So very good. So the 11 million's there just in case. And that was good news as well. In the legacy fund, even though it's $100 million, we have had $79.4 million in interest earnings from that fund to offset the impact on the taxpayer. So this brings us back to the decision that a past council made, and in fact the mayor was one of the representatives who had the very arduous task of determining whether or not the city of Brampton should sell Brampton Hydro. At the end of the day, we did sell hydro, and it has had a very positive impact on the city's financial sustainability since that time. So this is good news, and I really hope that this is the kind of messaging that we are going to get out to the municipality, to our citizens, that Brampton is in a very good financial situation. We're stable, and we continue to make the right decisions to ensure that we have financial sustainability for the future, and we really are ready to face the ups and downs that the economy takes. This council, at the beginning of the term, also implemented a 2% levy for infrastructure. But this is something that the council has been doing for many years, and I would just ask Mr. Sutton again to talk about when the infrastructure levy was first implemented and how that infrastructure levy has again helped us to build the dollars that impact our capital. But it hasn't been the same. When we see a downturn in the economy, when we've had times when we didn't feel the taxpayer could fund that particular amount, there were times when council determined we're not going to do 2% this year, we may do 1%. And so it has been a floating number. If we can continue to maintain that 2% on an annual basis, it really is the right decision to make sure that we do have the funds to meet our infrastructure needs into the future. So just on that one.
To the chair. So the infrastructure levy was initially implemented in 2007. Obviously, those funds get utilized towards capital every year. So it's not like, because of our infrastructure deficit and the backlog of work we have to do on our facilities and roads and replacement of other assets such as vehicles and the transit fleet, we effectively spend that money each year. But that increase on the infrastructure levy has aided a lot over the years to help us build up an increasing capital budget to replace those needs. What I could tell you is that the number was floating around for a number of years, which it makes it very difficult to plan for. Obviously, when we're trying to plan a multi-year budget, a multi-year forecast, if we can have a number that's more stable, it's better for us in terms of understanding and how we prioritize our capital. I want to mention that going back to the beginning of this term of council, you really raised the bar, you stepped it up. A very difficult decision because it is a tax increase, but it's a much needed tax increase. You saw back in December, we showed you the infrastructure deficit and what this means in terms of this 2% infrastructure levy that we build into the operating budget each year. And where we start to see that curve in terms of that 10-year capital forecast start to level out. And that's a big part of that is to do with this infrastructure levy. So I just want to mention that the courage it took to make that decision, and it definitely assists us with meeting the needs of our citizens.
Okay, so just in conclusion, I wanted to recognize and thank our finance staff and our senior management team for a lot of the decisions that, or the recommendations that you have made to council in this regard, because you really, the numbers here are sort of proof perfect that we are doing and making the right decisions when it comes to financial sustainability for the municipality. So thank you. Good job. Councillor Medeiros?
Thank you through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Moyles. I think you've raised some real important points. But when we talk about departmental operations, and I know it's a forecast, and I'm sure at budget time we'll understand why is there a surplus. Certainly the story sometimes is around are we maintaining service levels? Certainly there's other explanations. I know we won't get into that now because that's during a budget exercise. And also when we talk about the operational or department operations, would that include, I think, everything out that we contract out, for example? Would that include, because sometimes I know there's some different pots departments would use or how they capture it. So it's not necessarily an operational plan, but a lot of money, especially in certain departments, are using more contracted out services that's not captured. And but I'm specifically really want to hone in on our service impacts in terms of the surplus that we're forecasting right now.
Through the chair, so the contracted services are built into the operating budget. Again, those things can fluctuate from year to year in terms of what that need is in a given year. So when we're doing preventive or demand maintenance, things of that nature, of course, winter storm events, we can't predict 100%. So in certain years we may have more events than others, and so there could be surpluses or even overspending occur in a given year on that basis. The way we budget in terms of our staffing, we budget on a full calendar basis. So that sometimes results in savings that flow down through to the bottom line. Because of the transformation that's occurred, there's been a bit of a time period here before we've actually had the proper people in place. We've gone and done a number of recruitments, put some key people in place, and really raised the bar in that respect. But sometimes that takes some time. So even though we're budgeting for the full year cost for that position, there's a bit of a gapping that occurs over a couple of months until we fill those bodies. So that is part of the surplus that is occurring here.
So through the chair, then I guess my understanding is that as we're doing the staffing, because I know there was some savings, the surplus might not be as such large surplus at the end of the year when we finally look at exactly what we did. And I'm just more concerned about the service level, because certainly if we do have this type of surplus, because just from a and I know that's a budget exercise, but when you see the story and you see the surplus, then question begs either we're not. Either we can increase our services, or there's a disconnect there. So that even though the surplus is a good story, but it's always devil's in the details, and it's always good to see how what's the operational impact. But overall, I do agree that there's been prudent measures, and it's good to know how this council is really attuned to the financial stability and financial management of our budget. So. Thank you very much.
Just ask as a rule of thumb, is 1% variance in the finance world sort of acceptable for in terms of budgeting? Certainly we don't want to be in a deficit position. So.
Through the chair, so given the fact that we're a very growing municipality, it's well within reason to accept that sort of variance. As we get closer to our full growth potential here at the city, you'll start to see things leveling off in terms of adding new programs and services. So it becomes a little bit more stable in terms of what you're predicting in terms of your cash flow on a given year, but definitely given the size of our budget and the different programs and services that we offer here, it is well within reason.
Okay. So the other policy that I know was implemented by council in the past was that when we budget for staff, we budget the full cost of staff for the full year, And part of the reasoning for that is that you can actually use those funds to offset other costs that may occur, or to help with improving reserve balances for the future. I know the Peel Regional Police at one point adopted that policy when a new police officer is hired, and in fact it took them from a very big deficit to in fact having no debt now as well. So it's just a good policy to have a financial policy. Great. Okay, so thank you very much. Would someone move the report, please? Moved by Councillor Palache. All in favor? That's carried. Item 8.2.5 was in consent. 8.2.6 is the council and committee meeting calendar. Any comments or questions? Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only observation I'm going to make on this, excuse me, is this week we had the council golf tournament, and for obvious reasons, we want there to be some predictability around when that tournament is held, and we've kind of landed on like the third Wednesday in September, and third Monday, so sorry, in September. So yeah, I'm going to show up on the wrong day. So I'm looking at September, and you have a planning and development committee at 7 on the 10th and on the 17th. If you could maybe take under advisement between now and next Wednesday, when these minutes come to council, the opportunity to maybe move the 17th to the 24th. We generally have a week in between our two planning meetings anyways, and for some reason September has them back to back, 2 Mondays in a row. So if you could just, maybe with the Commissioner of Planning and the Clerk's Department, if you could take a look at that, and rather than changing it as we get closer and work out a date. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank the clerk as well for recognizing that there is sometimes the need to have a bit of a variance around March break. So the week following the March break has been left without any meetings. I'm assuming you did that on purpose, and I just wanted to thank you for that. Consistent with council practice in the past, yeah. In the past, we've always had to ask. So I for one, appreciate that. Thank you very much. So I take a motion then to approve the report. Moved by Councillor Moore. All in favor? That's carried. Item 8.2.7 is here. Budget amendment request for the municipal election project planning and implementation. Any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, I take a mover. Moved by Councillor Bowman. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. And I guess the next item is 8.2.8, which is the report from Peel Regional Police, and we're going to recognize Fiona Peaceful to actually address the report, if you will. I don't believe many of us have had time to read the full report, so it would be certainly helpful if you were able to give us sort of an executive summary about the findings.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to join you this morning. I can appreciate this was a last-minute matter. I just want to take a moment to give a few moments of background, talk about the report and some next steps. As you recall, on June 6th, there was an internal audit committee meeting, and the audit committee meeting had a report entitled Human Resources Salary Administration. And at that point in time, there was information disclosed regarding outside policy requests. Further to that report and discussion, on June 21st, this council unanimously elected to have Peel Regional Police undertake an investigation. On June 22nd, correspondence was sent. Shortly thereafter, Peel Regional Police contacted myself and assigned staff from the Fraud Bureau to undertake an investigation. Meetings were held over the course of the summer months. There was a series of meetings, phone calls, emails in order to provide the requested information. Yesterday morning, the report was received. The report was delivered to me later yesterday morning. So I've had an opportunity to review the report with a number of my colleagues here at the city. And what the report indicated, and from the covering letter from our Chief Evans, is that the investigation is complete and no formal criminal offenses were committed by City of Brampton employees. What they did do is they also concluded with 5 conclusions that they garnered based on their investigation. The first is that salary expenditures came from council-approved budgets. There was never a so-called slush fund. No criminal offenses have been committed by City of Brampton employees, as I previously mentioned. The reported 1.25 million in salary expenditures is not accurate. The actual amount of salary expenditures paid to the 167 employees over that 5.5-year period was $614,155,199. No senior managers benefited from the OPR program. They were used for legitimate reasons to reward those employees either entitled to or deemed to be deserving of a salary increase. Given the widespread use of the OPR program, particularly in this period, the time it was in place was 2009 to 2014. It was being used by senior managers, supervisors, and HR across all departments. It points to systemic issues with the program and not illegal activity. And as discussed at it was a May 31st council meeting, through our People Advantage effort, we recognize the need to modernize human resources policies and procedures. The current the policies that enabled OPRs to happen did not encourage accountability, consistency, nor do they promote public transparency. And it is our intention to bring forward an updated report to this group on November 1st, where we'll be seeking your review and approval of an updated salary administration policy. Thank you.
I do have a list of speakers, starting with Councillor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Fiona, for the overview. So, just need some I need some more explanation. This is a systemic issue with the program. Exactly what does that say? Systemic issue. What does systemic issue mean?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think really what it points to is that there were policies and procedures in place that were disregarded, and decisions were made that did not support policy compliance. So it just became an acceptable practice that OPRs were allowed. And so it really speaks to, I think, a broader a cultural challenge at the time where the salary administration policy, was not being followed.
So basically, at the time, the senior management team implemented a program which was not sanctioned by council, and I don't see. It says the report says it was approved by council, but when I look at page Appendix C, it says on top that's approved by council, AF 032002. Now, I see the report Appendix I further on, and I scanned through this as we were doing other business, and I see the report of March 1st, 2013, that was approved by the senior management team. Received this report for information purposes. The senior management team accepted the proposed interim practice for outside policy adjustments, and the implementation of this practice be approved for the 2013 administration. But I don't see the council resolution or report that went to council for approval. So How can, I don't see how this report can say the council approved this. I don't see the report where the council approves this. Usually, we would have a report from staff coming to us, whether a committee or council, asking for approval, and there'd be a resolution and so on. Because I certainly don't remember back in 2013 ever having dealt with this item where staff was asking that we provide the delegated authority to allow the staff to provide these bonuses, I guess you call it. I don't remember, and I don't see anything in this report that even the evidence is not provided in this report that supports the conclusion that this was approved by council.
Can you respond, Fiona?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, if I may clarify, the OPR program was never approved by council. The original policy of 2002 was approved. The practices that happened between 2009 and 2014 were not approved by council. What the Peel Regional Police report is in my estimation is inferring is that the council approved budgets. Council on an annual basis, OPRs were included in existing budgets. So it's suggesting that it was part of council-approved budgets. The practice of OPRs were not approved by council.
And are you suggesting that it was approved in 2002 by council, this policy?
Yes. Through you, Madam Chair, that policy in 2002 was approved by council.
Which policy is that, the OPR policy?
The salary administration policy. The OPR was never put into a policy framework, and council would never have approved an OPR policy. So the salary administration policy of 2002 received council approval. The integration of OPRs into salary administration practices at the city never had council approval.
Okay. So basically what you're saying is that back in 2013, staff took advantage of that 2002 policy, snuck it in without anybody knowing. Basically, that's what actually happened then.
I think to clarify is that the policy of 2002 remained. There were practices outside of policy, and those commenced in 2009 and continued through till 2014 when there was a decision to cease the outside policy request program.
Okay. Now, the issue that caused my antennas to go up when we got the report initially was the word in there was that one of the conditions of giving these bonuses was favoritism. Now, that to me, it's a very serious issue that some employees were getting bonuses for favoritism. What does that mean? Getting a bonus for favoritism. What is so? Can you explain what that could have entailed?
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of favoritism, that was a perception. And when the report was authored by Human Resources, I believe that was a 2013 summary, that was inferred as a reason. So there was a perception that an employee may be given an increase based on a particularly cordial working relationship, or they had been given a certain plum assignment. So there was a perception. Whether that could be validated is we can't validate it. And the reason is the documentation that would have been provided to support an OPR would never have inferred that there was favoritism. It was strictly a perception among staff.
Mm-hmm. Now, the report that we received where initially it was of concern, of course, even $614,000 is of concern, but 2.5 million was of greater concern, obviously. So how did it happen that there was a miscalculation, almost double the amount? I mean, how did staff, whoever did the report initially, come up with 1.25 million, and then the police are coming up with 614,000? Sorry.
So, yeah, no, good question, thank you. And really what happened is that when the OPR issue was identified and shared internally, what the HR group at the time is calculated that it was a 1.25 million cost if it was annualized. What happened is once we dug deeper into the information, there could have been, employee A receives an increase. They may only receive that increase for 8 weeks because they're acting as this, an acting manager for a period of time. When the 1.25 million was calculated, it was as though they were in that role for a year. And what happened is, once we went back and we pulled the 230 incidents, we then pulled all the documentation, we pulled payroll information, we realized that the 1.25 million had been calculated as an annualized expense, when in fact, in some cases, it might have been 4 weeks, 4 months, 8 weeks, and then we were able to validate on a case-by-case basis for how long that person received that outside policy request and what the direct impact was to their compensation for that period of time. So the 1.25 million is though they got it for a year. The 614,000 is if they received it for, it's the accurate time for the duration of the change in their compensation.
So you're saying that most of these funds went to people who were in an acting capacity for a short period of time. So they were not management people. There were people who were outside of management. They were called in to act as a manager or a higher position than they normally. Like for instance, you have a manager, then you acted as a director for a period of time. So they would get the extra money for doing a director's job. Is that basically what happened here?
In some cases, that is what happened, not in all cases. So there's a series of reasons that outside policy requests were done. And as an example, some of it could be promotions, transfers, temporary upgrades, merit increases, performance bonuses, leaves of absence, terminations, resignations. There was all sorts of reasons behind why outside policy requests may have been initiated. And so in some cases, they were very temporary, and they were for non-union employees, but it could have been somebody who was a non-manager.
So in our policy, in our procedure, even today, is there a provision that people are rewarded for doing a higher job for a short period of time? Is that still ongoing? It wouldn't be. I wouldn't consider that an OPR. I think that would be considered probably as a normal process in our system, that people who do a higher job should be rewarded. And I totally agree with that people should be. And I actually have asked people, sometimes I've asked people, are you getting a higher pay for doing a tougher job? And of course, people said, of course I am. So I would imagine that that's standard policy, and it should not have been part of the OPR package. It should have been separate from that. Is that the way we do things here, or is that the OPR was to basically put in place just to reward people who were doing jobs outside of their classification?
So this practice does continue. If you are taking on additional duties, you're taking on the role of an acting manager or an acting analyst, you would have an increase.
Right.
If it based on a series of calculations, and that is within policy. What was outside of policy is if we elected to give that person, one person 5%, and maybe 6 months later somebody received 11%. So the 5% would have been in policy, but somewhat the 11% would have been outside of policy. So what happened is we were rewarding people for additional work. What we weren't doing is being consistent in our practices of how we rewarded.
So in other words, it could be that if I'm a manager and I like a certain employee, I give him a little extra, and I give him a little extra than the person I don't like so much. That was possible in this program. It was something that could happen. Is that correct?
It was definitely a perception. Based on the documentation that we were able to review for those 230 incidents, there was no time did anyone infer they were giving it because of a preferential treatment or favoritism. However, there was an organizational perception that happened, and that's why it was identified as a driver behind OPRs back a number of years ago.
Okay. And finally, last question through the chair. I believe that there was one employee that received around $70,000, and which I thought that was quite a large sum. And can you tell me for how long that person was doing something other than their normal task? Was it for a year, 2 years, 5 years period?
So, in fact, it was reported there was an individual who received a $95,000 cumulative increase, when in fact, when we did the annualized cost, the greatest amount received by any employee was approximately $38,000. And that was, I believe it was for about a 7-month duration. I'd have to double check that particular documentation, possibly a bit more. And so they received that for the duration of a particular assignment to a more senior role than their permanent home role.
Okay. Actually, I do have a final question. You stemmed from your answer. So if we were to ask to provide us in camera the list of the people who received these bonuses, would it identify, would it say why they received this bonus for? Would it say on there? What was the reason for receiving this bonus?
There was rationale that we documented as to why they received it. If it was a promotion, a temporary upgrade, and then we have all the background information. If I may, in many cases, employees do not know they received an outside policy request. All they know is they got 7%. They don't realize that maybe the practice was 5%. So in many cases, employees now, out of the 167, some of them obviously have left our organization with normal attrition, a lot of these employees would have no idea. They would not know that they've received an OPR because they thought that was our practice. So we do have all of the justification and the documentation at an employee level that would help explain the thinking behind that OPR decision.
I see. Okay, that's all the questions I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sprobieri. Councillor Medeiros?
Well, thank you to the Chair. Thank you, Fiona, for your work. I guess just, I haven't had a chance to go through the report, but there are some questions or things that, pop out when you look at the report, and I think over time, Council will benefit from more time diving into the report. Just for, I guess, my knowledge, the police investigation was based on documents we shared with the police. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we provided. I guess a couple things that just pop out. So if we go to, I guess, the actual police report on page 6 and talk about the pay adjustment increased substantially in 2011, which appears to coincide with the suspension of performance management system, the increase in OPR requests. So essentially, that time period even before leading up, there's a pay freeze or a merit increase freeze. So certainly when departments are presenting budgets, we do have a line that says salary adjustments or salary wages. How does that go undetected? That during a freeze, so we have a freeze, so you shouldn't see an increase, but then after departments are reporting increases, does that not, again, you weren't there at the time, I'm not asking you to answer, it's unfair to put you on the spot, but to me that just raises, alarm bell. It's a normal, if I come here next year after a wage freeze, when I'm looking at the budget, I'm assuming that I'm not going to see an increase in wage salaries unless it corresponds with additional FTEs. So that to me, sort of, and that's something that I'd like to hear more about.
I think Fiona can address that.
Yeah.
Again, thank you. I appreciate the questions. If I may, although I wasn't here, if I may answer, really what we would have seen is these outside policy requests would have been in the range of, if we annualize them, they would be at about $100,000, $120,000 a year. And they would have been over multiple cost centers. It could have been across 50 cost centers or 30 cost centers. So it would have been very difficult when you were to review a salary budget for a department or a line of business, it would have been very difficult to determine, because the increase would not have looked substantive from a year-over-year perspective. That it would have been in the range of $100,000 to $120,000 a year.
So, thank you. Through the chair. So if you go to the last report, one thing that, and I appreciate that you talked about, but if you look at the approved request, page 7, and you look at the different departments, in the CAO office, you have 16 approved requests. And compare that to departments. As far as I know, there's not too much staff in CAO's office. So compare a department that has hundreds and hundreds of people, and you see a CAO office that has 16 approved requests. And that doesn't ring door. These are the things that, to me, that, I don't know, pop out. If you go to page 6, just before, so let's look at Appendix A. We talk about promotional increase. There's a line, 2013, that says the outside policy amount is over 10%. If we go to the next bullet, temporary upgrade increase. Policy stipulates up to 10%. However, the outside policy amount is over the 10% threshold. Like these are certainly are, to a regular person and someone, I just find that it's pretty outrageous when you look at the type of information that's here. And, I think we have to be very careful if we're going to just brush it over as nothing was done. Because, one thing during the audit report, and I specifically asked, who was at charge? Who was accountable for this? Who made the decisions? And everybody looked around not knowing who the decisions were. And it was completely stated that we're not sure where the authorization came from. But yet, it talks about that each departmental, because I specifically asked, I remember during the audit report, was this something that presented at SMT? And I was specifically told that we have no proof or we don't know if it was presented to SMT. Then after we have a police report that tells us that it went to SMT. So these are the things that pop out to me. But I in general, I think there will be time to digest this further. But certainly, when you talk about a time, notwithstanding with the introduction of, for example, the sunshine list, it's very easy, when you see a sunshine list, and that's public information, during a time of a freeze, that you see salary increases of certain individuals. And I think that's some of the stuff that comes out, and I think certainly, employees, and speaking to employee morale, they would be able to see what employees got and what employees didn't, what was the increase. And it was interesting at a time of a freeze that on sunshine list there's a bump in someone's salary. So that to me is something that pops out and is of concern. But I think finally, when we go through this report in a little bit more detail, and I am assured that that's something that we're modernizing our HR policies, we're modernizing, we do the report, but also the reporting. One thing at the audit that got me too was exactly what Councillor Spoveri mentioned, is the lack of documentation or articulation exactly why that person got the increase. So that quota of other. That certainly is worrisome. Certainly when we look towards management, we look towards, that best advice, and we look at, but when you look at going back to that one page, and the CEO's office has 16 out of policy requests. It just, that to me, it really, it says it right there. That to me is the high point. But certainly we'll have more time, and I think we'll have more opportunity if we have further questions or details. And I do appreciate the work on this, Fiona, and I thank you, and I do look forward to HR continue, to tighten the rules, and that we ensure that we have an equitable system here, so employees can flourish and perform in a manner which corresponds to our authorized policies. Thank you.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very quickly, obviously, I think we haven't had time to read the full report as we just received it about 9:30. I just want to commend Councillor Medeiros for putting forth the motion, and I want to thank Council for unanimously supporting it. I think it was imperative that Council undertake its due diligence required to protect the interests of the taxpayers. After the information was originally provided to us, just some things that just, your antennas pop up when you had mentioned that it didn't encourage transparency and accountability, and that this decision was made, if I'm not mistaken, approved by council, but, even though many of the members of council who were there at the time were unaware. And just taking a look at the conclusion, to quote, systemic issue with the program, lacked formalized standards resulting in the program being inconsistent. Issues with the program were recognized and attempts were made to tighten controls. Unfortunately, these attempts were ineffective. So these are the things that, just popping out originally. I'm definitely going to go through it a little bit more in depth. Just some concerns as well that, it's originally staff had said it's 1.25 million, but, after the investigation, essentially it's half of that. And so I'm just wondering where perhaps, we might have, as a corporation, missed the mark. And so these, I guess, are questions left for council after we have time to go through it a little bit more thoroughly. But I just want to thank you guys for bringing it up. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, just so I understand this, so when we talk about the salary freeze, people still move through the grid, correct? And people still, is there a COLA that still comes on that?
So to clarify, there was, the pay for performance was frozen, but there was, at that point in time, we still had something called COLA, cost of living allowance, and that was given to employees for the duration of the freeze.
So, in a budget, even though it was spread out all over a budget, you would still have a COLA increase. So, and people still move through the grid, right? People still, as they moved on, they would move up the grid, and that would increase their salaries too. When I read this, and we haven't had an opportunity to digest it all, the conclusion I got out of it was that the council didn't approve, and you said it, any OPRs at the time, and staff at the time, although perceivably did something wrong, and that's what a lot of us have perceived, and I think that's rightfully so. I guess the question I have to ask is that the staff that made those decisions, and they're obviously upper staff, any of them still here?
They are no longer with the organization.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a testament to the organizational change that we've made around here. And I had some, when we go through these budgets, the council members ask many questions through it. Sometimes I always felt, and I had some really concerns over the years, that the answers that we were being given weren't, I'm not going to say truthful answers, but they were certainly not bringing out all the information that we were trying to get at. And I remember Councillor Spovieri at one budget going after staff and for half an hour, I think, and trying to get an answer, just one little answer. I don't even remember that, Councillor Spovieri. Staff at that time weren't given the answers. It doesn't mean the questions weren't being asked. But, last year's budget, I thought, and not because I was chairing it, it was more thanks to this new staff that we have here, this council got more details in that budget than I've ever seen before. Ever. And thank you to staff for that, because that's a change that we didn't have before. Kind of reminded me when I first got elected back in 1999, when staff threw all these books in front of us that were huge. It was a line by line. Oh my God, it was a detail by detail. It was a number by number. No council could possibly have digested all that. Although 7 of us that were new, Madam Mayor, you remember, certainly tried to digest it. But I just want to thank the staff, because I think the changes that we've made here, staffing and the budget, the way we're doing budget, is much better process. And hopefully, to somebody else's point, this type of thing can never get by anybody again. So, thank you.
Councillor Palaszczuk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. thank you very much for providing this to us on such short notice. The report coming through late last night, but you certainly have a lot of information at your fingertips, and I appreciate that. For some of the inconsistencies that you had mentioned, in particular, with relation to the out of policy, going ahead to be a little bit more consistent. And I guess I need to have kind of the overall scope and not pinpoint one particular, but, and this question is more for Harry, I think that if something along those lines comes up again, what's your course of action? Do you, I guess to give an example, let's say one of our staff comes to us and says, Mississauga is offering this much more money, and we're not within budget, but to keep that person here until the next budget cycle, what's your course of action, or the commissioner's course of action, in terms of that?
Through you, as you recall from the audit, there's been no OPRs, I think, since 2015. So this happens quite often that, for retention, of course our employees are being more sought out now than ever, that does come forward to me. And I always just talk about the policy, the 2002 policy. I never go over whether it's 5% or 2%. So we, to this point, have never done anything like that. We try and retrain the employee through other means other than money, but the policy is extremely outdated, and that's why we're coming to you in November. We reward more new people coming into the corporation than we reward those that are here. So we have to fix this, but in no way have I ever gone outside of policy. I would say to HR, what's our policy, and we can never provide more than that to retain.
So Harry, what you're essentially saying is that you haven't been given that, that opportunity, or that issue hasn't come up to you yet. But let's say it has, and it's somebody that you really want to keep here. What is your course
Chair,
of action?
it's happening every week, but I never go outside of policy. That's the CAO's role, never to go outside of policy. That is the role to council. You've got one employee, and that's the CAO, so you never go out of policy. Never. So the only way I can retain them is with the existing policies that are in place, and sometimes we've lost some employees for that. It's come across weekly. We have some managers that are making far less than their staff that report to them because of this policy. And that's the way it is. And until we fix that policy, we're trying to retain those staff through other means. But it has come up all the time, Councillor.
So I don't see the big deal in it's maybe a discussion that needs to have. Well, I just don't want to lose anybody that's good, obviously, and especially when we have outdated policy.
So we're coming to November and to modernize this and ensure there's clarity and accountability and transparency to you and the public on this.
Okay. On the Councillor Medeiros raised a point about the 16 approved requests from the CAO's office, but I don't recall, I'm sure you have some kind of, I think there's a lot of rationale that can be had for that, but do you have any comments on it?
Through you, Madam Chair, at this point, the CAO's office, although it may have looked like there were 16, at this point in time, directly reporting to the CAO is Human Resources, Office of the City Clerk, Economic Development, Strategic Communications, Internal Audit. I mean, although it may look as though in the CAO's office there's 3 or 4 staff, including Harry, there's other individuals who would be considered part of the CAO office from a reporting relationship point of view.
So rather than that going to strictly to that commissioner for the department, that could have came to the CAO of the time, and they would have given their approval on that.
Correct.
That's what I figured. Okay. I guess this is one of those things where you wish you knew now what you knew then, and you may not have voted on any particular way or supported this going forward. It kind of is that, but to the 1.25 and the 614, that and the kind of that favoritism that had been bounced around. I understand how, with the audit and the findings that were found, and the fact that the biggest thing was that council didn't know, and we needed to get this to council. So that overlook of the 125, or the assumption that this was continuous in the future years, but then it didn't reflect that. It was actually either that job had stopped, or it went into the budget so that it was no longer an OPR. If it was within before a budget, and then it came to where if it was going to continue, it went into the budget of the following year, which was then approved by council. Is correct, right? So I understand that. The favoritism portion of it, I'm upset in the fact that it was, and your words were, for the favoritism was perception.
The perception.
And for, I find it's hard because, that's something that you guys you obviously have to look into, but it could stem from a rumor. One person could start a rumor that, and I'm not saying that this, in that particular was, but in fact, it could spread like wildfire and become a perception when it could have actually have been one person that had started something. And I'm not saying that this is or isn't, but it could happen. I'm upset, though, that the fact that I'm finding out that we used that word, and it wasn't actually the rationale for that actual out of policy request. And that's what I find is unfortunate, because that goes out there, and once it goes out, you don't get that back.
If I may, the report was written in, I think it was that version was 2013, and you'll find in kind of appendices H, I, and J, you'll see that there was communications at various points in time to senior leadership, to the Chief Administrative Officer, and I believe favoritism was used to represent some of the perceptions, and I think often that speaks to the culture of the organization as well. Mm-hmm. So that was a point in time of 4 or 5 years ago. Yep. And certainly I think now I'm trying to learn the organization's history. I think I can appreciate why people might have perceived that. Mm-hmm. And but I agree, it's a tough word to see as given, but it was never part of the rationale. It was strictly perception.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And just mulling over what has been said here, I see that from a police perspective that there was no illegal activity that occurred. I understand that, and from the police perspective. But what I see happened back in that era that I was part of, a few of us were part of, is that there was a culture of contempt for council authority from that management team of the day. Not only in this instance, but also in other issues that we dealt with, which has landed the city in a lot of problems that we're dealing with even today. I believe that even though there was no criminal activity involved, I believe that the people of those days that cannot be let out scot-free. I believe that just to keep this, so that people don't, this doesn't just get brushed under the carpet or washed away. In a sense, I believe that those people that were involved, that management team of that day of 2013, they should be made public. They should be publicized. Their names, that they had that group of people had, I believe, had contempt of council, and that they did things without council approval, and that their name should be made public, and so therefore it'd be a warning to future, if it ever happens again, that the people just don't walk away and nothing happens to them, Madam Chair.
I think our legal counsel would like to comment, Councillor Strawberry.
That's a matter on which I would like to consult with committee in closed session. That discussion should take place there before anything further occurs.
Okay. So we would need a motion then to add that in camera if that is the case. Moved by Councillor Gibson.
Well, we're going into camera anyway, so we need legal advice on this issue.
Okay, so
I don't think we need to have a motion.
Yeah, we
To
do
move
need a
into
motion.
camera, okay, then I move that we move into camera
Okay.
to
But
get legal
Councillor Strawberry,
advice.
can we put the item
Certainly.
on the in-camera agenda to be dealt with when we deal with in-camera?
Yeah, that's fine.
So, Madam Chair, so just so we do things by procedure, what I think is being contemplated here is adding a second closed session item. And the reason for the item going in closed session will be to receive advice that's subject to the solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. We need to be clear, and we need to take a vote if we're going to add that to the agenda.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Gibson. All in favor? Hold on, I'm going to have to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? So does that carry?
Yeah, we go to camera. It goes into the...
So there are 10 members of committee here, as I see in the room. If you counted 5 hands, then 5, and 5 did not vote, they're counted in the negative. So it loses on a tie.
Did you count Councillor Dillon?
He did put his hand up.
Yeah, you had it like this.
Okay, I'm going to have to take another count. Would members of council who want to support the motion to go in camera, would you please raise your hands in the air? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That carries. Okay, thank you very much. So there are no more speakers to this motion. My question would be to the CAO, Mr. Schlang, in regards to the reports before us. There was quite a number of allegations in the media in regards to the audit report that the investigation from the police have proved really were not founded. Are we going to have a press release on this item?
Through Chair, yes, we've, we were prepared and we were waiting to see if the report was accepted by council. We're putting out a press release. Yes.
Okay. Could I have a motion then to receive the report? Moved by Councillor Moore. All in favor? Are you abstaining, Councillor Majerus? Okay. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay. So next item on the agenda then is item, I guess it's question period. Okay. Any questions on corporate services? No questions noted. With that, I'll hand the chair to the Chair of Public Works, Councillor Willits.
There are no staff presentations. The only 2 reports we have are in consent. They weren't pulled from consent. There's no new business, and so there's council question period. No council question period on this. Oh, sorry, Mayor Jeffrey. Sorry.
Well, with respect, Chair, I don't want you to be sitting there and not have some business to do in your section. I guess I just wanted to raise a question, and I've raised it with Commissioner Patushka. I'm pretty sure most of us have received calls about asphalting and the challenges that go on around the city. So my question is, and I've already raised it with him, but I thought I would raise it with the rest of council. I am told by a resident yesterday who was very upset about the asphalting on his street that there appears to be a different notification process between what the region does and what the city does. This gentleman indicated that there were door hangers put out. He had multiple notifications and that he felt it was more effective. And I'm just interested to know if any other members of council have received complaints. Because at the end of the day, when we're doing the work, I know the residents appreciate it, but it is disruptive to their driveways, 2 to 3 days, sometimes longer, depending on the timing of the work. And in this case, I thought he raised a legitimate concern that I thought maybe other councillors had experienced. In this case, we provide, my understanding is a personalized letter and put it in people's mailbox, but I don't know if it's enough, and I guess I just want to review it and see if there's any improvements that we can make so that our residents feel that we're being consistent, and considering how closely we work with the region, I just thought I would raise it here and see if there was anybody else who had that experience. And I'm always looking for customer service improvements if possible, and the debate will help. And maybe Mr. Padushka could elaborate. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. As part of the audit work plan for 2017, audit is auditing 2 resurfacing contracts. The 2013 contract where there was a major issue regarding driveways, and they're also auditing the 2016 contract, which concluded earlier this year. Although the audits haven't been completed, they did focus on the notification. So audit went out and took a look at our notification that we put out. They compared us to the City of Toronto. They compared us to our neighbors, Halton Hills, Oakville, Mississauga, and an outlier, the City of Niagara Falls. And in all cases, our notification is probably more robust than, it's the same type of format is used by all municipalities, and ours is a little bit more robust in terms of the information provided. Having said that, we also took a look at what the Region Appeal does, and you have to understand that when they do work, they actually turn the water off on a whole street, and so they do it immediately, and immediately somebody's like halfway through a shower or cooking or what have you, and the water's just not there. So they have a more, what I would call, an emergency type situation. So they go around home to home and give out a hanger. Getting back to our own situation though, on resurfacing, I mean, we put out a notification in the newspaper saying that a refurbishing contract is coming, and we point our citizens to our webpage. On our webpage, we list every street, regardless whether it's a city project or a regional project or whoever's project it is, and we list every street with any work that we are aware of that's going on that street. Then, when we actually do get to a street, in the case of the resurfacing contract, 7 days before work starts, we then hand deliver notices to each and every resident on the street. And then before we actually take out any driveway or curb, we actually knock on the door and hopefully find the resident at home. And if we don't, we go even after hours and try and contact the resident to let them know that their driveway will be inoperable. So I think we go to some pretty extraordinary measures to get the word out. Again, as I started off by saying, our internal audit is looking at the resurfacing program, and they'll be coming in with a report at the end of the process, and we're going to be re-reviewing the notifications as they go out.
Councilor Pleshy.
Won't work. There you go. Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I didn't watch
And just to that, I had received a few calls, and it was a regional issue that we were discussing with some residents, but they had, when I talked to the region, they had said that they use the contractors. The contractors are the actual ones that go out and put the door hangers on and give notifications of work. Is that depending on what type of work?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not familiar with the region's exact protocol, but we use both as well. We have the contractor go out, we have our own inspectors go out, so it's like belt and suspenders, or we try.
Okay.
And try and get a hold of the homeowners and give them as much information as we can.
Okay. I did want to also take this opportunity to say Colonel Bertram, in between Wanless and Mayfield, had just been redone. Everything's finished now. And the contractors that worked there, in collaboration with the homeowners, did an excellent job with the accommodating of the homeowners parking on the streets, getting them off the street when they could, the flag people, when they had dirt, they were washing roads. And the contractors on Van Kirk, in between Wanless and Sandalwood, did a terrible job. They don't have flag people. The dirt's still on the roads. They did not accommodate the residents. I think we need to, and these are two great examples of what to do and what not to do, I guess. And so this is I've seen this for myself. I've received calls. Maybe this is an opportunity to go look at the two to see what we can do. I don't know if you've heard anything about them or not, but
through you, Mr. Chair, this is news to me.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Councillor Miles.
Thank you. In regards to this particular subject, the issue that I find is most unsettling for residents is the fact that when they're doing their resurfacing, they'll go in and they'll do all of the grinding, and then they have, is it a month to come back and do the resurfacing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, our contract stipulates that the contractor has 6 weeks from the time that he first steps on the street to the time that he fully completes all work. Now, that might be extended if there's a drought in the summertime and we don't want to plant sod, so we purposely extend that. But we try for a 6-week period that absolutely everything is done. Removals, replacement, the grinding, the paving, the driveway restoration, the sodding, all of that's done within a 6-week period.
Is it possible, Mr. Patushka, to schedule things so that people are not experiencing this for such a long period of time? 6 weeks in the summer, if it starts July 1st to mid-August in the heat and the dust, and it does have a quality of life impact.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, if the street has, it's a small street, a couple of 100 feet long, has maybe 10 residents on it, 6 weeks is way too long. But I mean, if you have a big street, a long stretch, 6 weeks is actually pushing it. So it depends on the street, but we have a minimum of 6 weeks, regardless of the size of the street. And usually on the smaller streets, let's face it, the contractor, time is money. They're not there to stretch things out. They want to get things done as quickly as possible and get out as well.
But I understand they go around, they do all the grinding and all of the different streets around the community, and then they come back and they do all the paving. Is that?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, the whole refurbishing program, we're not just resurfacing the street, we're refurbishing the street. So we're fixing everything that there is to fix on the street. And really what's driving the whole program is the concrete work. And I see Councillor Fertini's not here because he'd ask a question on the concrete, but the concrete work is the first to be done, and so we either pull out curb or replace curb in long stretches, so that has to happen first. Then we do the sidewalks, and then we do the driveways, and then we do the base asphalt, and then the top lift asphalt. So all these things are a separate crew, a separate layer that gets put on. But it's all driven by the concrete crew, and how much do they actually open up? How many streets do they open up so that the rest of everybody else can catch up to them?
During your notification, does it explain all of that to the residents?
I'm not actually sure whether it says the 6-week time period on it. I think that's something that we just have in our contract.
Might be a good idea to do that. One example that has been a real issue is Massey Street, and it is a long street. But the summer before last, the region went in and they tore up the whole street. It's a big street, extended period of time, lots of issues that came through to my office about that. And then this year, the city went in and tore up it again. So I know we do our best to kind of coordinate these programs. I don't know what happened with Massey Street, but it really is important that the city and the region coordinate their scheduling.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, in fact, we do. I mean, to get the best product, what we try and do is have the region come in a year before we come in and give a chance, because their work is underground work primarily.
Yeah.
And so we try and give the trenches a chance to settle before we come in. I mean, we could just as easily put the water main into our contract and repave the street, but then you'll get settlement on the brand new pavement. So it's just good practice to let nature take its course and consolidate the trench. So
it makes a lot of sense when you explain it. So I guess maybe when you're looking at the audit, we look at the details of the information that's provided to people.
Sure.
Because it does make sense. Everybody knows that you want to let ground settle, otherwise it's an expense that is incurred that isn't necessary. So, it might even be an idea to have a little booklet with the information, and it goes out to the homeowner. You might have your covering letter, but then enclosed with that would be a booklet that gives people the details as to the reasons why. Yeah, good. Something to consider when you come back with the audit.
through you, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy if they read the page that we gave them, but sure, we'll look at a booklet as well.
What did you just say? Sorry?
I said I'd be happy if they actually read the notification we gave them.
I know. Maybe they'll read a book. I don't know. Anyway, thank you.
Councillor Bowman, you have a question.
Questions, yes.
Denied.
Well, Joe, I'm glad the mayor brought up the issue, because I can tell you I've had more calls this summer from Peel Village residents because we did trees, we did curbs, we did new lights, and we did water mains. And between them all in one location, I can't tell you, and I'm glad Councillor Miles asked a question about coordination, because a lot of the calls were the guy just came to plant the tree. Well, he went up on the brand new curb, chipped the brand new curb. Now we got to send a guy back to fix the curb. And I can't tell you how many calls I got about cable and bell wires being cut when I guess they're digging up the end of the driveway. So I know that we do try and coordinate as best we can. But there certainly seems to be times out there where different, whether it's the region or whether it's hydro, they don't seem to know what we're doing. And they go in and they either dig up work that we've just done, or they cause more work for us to be done. So, and maybe this was the perfect storm in Peel Village this summer, having all that work done. And for instance, like Village Court, they had to wait for, I think, 2 weeks for their driveway to be redone after the region left, because it was some confusion.
Lots of latitude here.
Some confusion. So when we get multiple projects like this, and you did say we do try and coordinate, what actions do we take to let like, who takes that initiative? Does Hydro call you, or do you call the region? How do we coordinate all of that work?
Through you, Mr. Chair. First of all, every utility and the authorities, like the Region of Peel and the City of Brampton, we have our own work program, and so we share our work programs with each other. We have monthly meetings that we sit down with the technical staff to see what they're up to and what we're about to do. Sometimes projects are advanced, sometimes they're retarded, depending on the schedule and what makes sense. Unfortunately, in Peel Village, it's reached an age where there's a lot of things have to happen at the same time. And I think you're going to see that in time, more and more that's going to happen throughout Brampton as the various subdivisions age, and everything needs to be done kind of at the same time. But yeah, we try and coordinate we do coordinate with one another, and I'm still not sure of all the details that went on in Peel Village, but I'm aware of that there have been issues there.
Okay, and second question, time's up. Fries are done, I guess. Fries are done. A resident asked me, and I thought, the more I thought about it, the more I wondered, it sounds like a great idea. With all the work going on, a resident approached me and said, you know, we haven't redone the curbs on my street. The stamp says, I think, 1969 on the curbs. He said, you know, there's a couple of us who want to have our driveways repaved, but we don't want to have the driveway repaved only to have somebody come and rip it up next year. Do we put out any type of letter, and I know it might be difficult, to residents that say, your curbs are scheduled to be redone in the year 2020? So, you know, if you, or could the councillors know that? So that if we have residents who want to go to the time and expense of concreting their driveway or interlocking their driveway, that they know before they do it, in 2 years, look, the end of your driveway may be torn up.
Through you, Mr. Chair, as you know, we pass our budgets on a year-by-year basis. So as far as technically the list, we've got a pavement management system that spells out when a certain street's going to be done. It's reviewed yearly, so streets do get moved around a little bit. They get moved around even more when combined with the region's plan. So although we've got a 5-year resurfacing plan, it's subject to adjustment on a year-by-year basis. So right now, as we're sitting here right now, we're actually planning the 2018 resurfacing program. And so that by January, we're able to go out, if council passes the budget, we're going to be able to go out and get a contractor for it. But having said that, come January, even the streets that are identified, even they might shift around. So it's very difficult to say, yeah, we're going to be there in 2020 when it could be 2021, or it could be advanced to 2019 or what have you. However, if people do want to get something done on their property, and they can always phone us, and we will look at it and we'll respond individually to people if people want to upgrade their driveway. We do provide that service.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Seems like you're getting a lot of work done in your ward. Yeah. Councillor Moore.
Well, thank you.
Question.
I just, on the same subject, since you're offering up so much latitude, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say I think that there has been a noticeable and measurable improvement in the coordination of work being done by the region and the city. And I can only suspect it's happening in Mississauga as well. It's back, you know, even in the early 2000s, there was, it was kind of random, and we'd find out, we'd have to respond to the work that they were doing or cancel ours. And I think you're doing a tremendous job given the amount of moving pieces to all of this. Sometimes emergencies arise that we didn't have in our budget that the region had to respond to. But Councillor Gibson and I were just chatting, and since there seems to be not much of an appetite for enhancing some of our neighborhoods in other parts of the city. Councillor Gibson and I would be happy to offer up some of our streets, and we know that our residents would be happy for a few weeks of disruption to have a new surface put out on their street. So, just offering that up to my colleagues and the Commissioner, that if you're looking for roads to spend your resources, we're happy to offer up one of 5. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Seeing no other questions, Joe, maybe you can do a workshop on road resurfacing in Brampton. There's no formalities list. We do have government relations matter, 11.1, is it, Peter? Government relations is, yeah. Item 11, if Noel wants to come out from the hallway there, and Lowell, no? Any questions for Lowell? Seeing none? What? Sorry? You're not off the hook yet.
I don't have a question. I don't know if you read and I think it kind of ties into the Ontario improving, this has to do with cannabis legislation. Niagara College, I think, is going to be offering a course on, I know we're all smiling,
cannabis,
but I think that our bylaw officers should consider taking that. I don't know what the course is going to look like, but I do think that we are going to, as a municipality, both at the city and the region, we're going to need to be able to respond to some of the concerns and the issues, and I think that a well-written bylaw at the front end would serve the city well. And so I just put that out there as something that, maybe it's a fit and maybe it's not, but I do think as a professional organization, if you could take under advisement, how do we best train our bylaw officers? How does our legal give us recommendation on what a local bylaw should look like? How do we protect our neighborhoods?
We'll take a look at the course, see if it's...
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you. Motion to receive, Councillor Gibson. All in favor? Thank you. Carries. There's no public here for public question period, unless any of the two at the top row want to come down. Could we get I guess we'll move into closed session is the next item. Can we get a motion? We're going to take the motion to move into closed, and we'll break for half an hour for lunch. Okay.
Mr. Chair, the motion to move into closed will be for 13.1, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and 13.2, advice that's subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose.
All in favor? Good. Moving closed. So 1:15. Be back for closed. Upstairs. Thank you. So